Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are here for a very, very special episode of the Total Movie Recall podcast or show. Still haven't decided yet. About a year into this venture, and still haven't decided on a proper avenue of where I'm taking it all. Anyway, I'm joined tonight by a very special guest, Big Dumb Movie Podcast. Corey, how the hell are you, mate? And where do
Oh
you
my
come
God.
from? Oh my God, he's from America!
I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me, Ellis, on Total Movie Recall, a podcast that I am an avid fan of. I listen to all your episodes. I love it. I like what you do. I like what you talk about. I like your opinions. My name's Corey, and I apologize that I'm not British. I know the audience is going to listen to this looking for some sexy, hunky British dude like Badger, and they might be slightly disappointed. So, you know what? I'm sorry about that. But I am an X-Men fan, a longtime X-Men fan, and I have been waiting to talk to someone like you about X-Men movies.
Well, this sort of venture and this like episode about the X-Men has been on the cards for about 12 months. I'm not even joking there. I started rewatching these films over a year ago because I thought this was going to come sooner than later, but we're in it now. It's fine.
You have just described every episode of Big Dumb Movie. Like it takes
really?
so long to get any episode off the ground. And then once we finish an episode, it takes a long time for me to get it released. So this is just what I'm used to. So it's fine with me. But I know what you mean. You know, it's been something that's been planned out for a while. It's been anticipated by me and you. I'm just glad we're here doing it, you know?
Yeah, man. We knew we were going to do something together. We just didn't know what. Just to let everyone know, I'm a very big fan of Corey's podcast. It's I didn't know there was podcasts out there doing a extensive 2-hour pods on Batman Forever, and not only that, 4-hour pods on Batman and Robin. Holy shit, mate! You host my favorite podcast.
Really? Thank you, man.
Well, yeah, don't get me wrong. The other team that you also play for is a podcast known as Spoilers. Very awesome podcast indeed as well. Go and check them guys out. But you also host on that one. I appeared on one episode because of my Patreon money
That's right.
That
and you will appear on a Big Dumb Movie episode, which has been kind of contingent on us doing this one. Because in this one, I think we're going to talk about all the X-Men movies, or at least a certain list of X-Men movies, which in my opinion is all of them.
Yep.
But I want to deep dive into the first one with you on Big Dumb Movie. So I'm telling the people right now, coming some point down the line, which again might mean another year, we're going to do a deep dive on the first X-Men. We can expect at least a 2-hour podcast out of that one.
I'd love to. Sounds like a plan. Looking forward to it, man. So, yeah, this is what this episode's all about, guys. We're going to be doing the X-Men franchise, a franchise that means quite a lot to me, just because I've seen them all in the cinema, but the first one. But don't get me wrong, there was an attempt to see that film in the cinema, but we'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, it's just it's a franchise that I absolutely adore. I've been like a mega fan of the movies for the whole time, but also dabbled in the comics and dabbled in what is a lot of people's like first introduction to superheroes and that sort of world is the 90s X-Men animated series, which is gold TV, if you ask me. What
quality, man.
What do you say about the animated series, Corey?
Well, that's going to kind of go into a few other things for me. And I tend to get long-winded, so you can stop me at any time. But I remember X-Men as being my first fandom. And I was little, very little. I was a little kid in the early 90s. So I was born in 86. So that means in 1990, I was probably about 4. And somewhere around 92, I don't remember how, but I remember being introduced to the X-Men. And to me, the concept was like better than any superhero genre, because it was a team of people and they had these abilities that were all different. And then there was enemies that they had that was also a team, Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Generally, that was kind of my first introduction, and they all had their own unique abilities. So it wasn't like a one-on-one situation like I was used to seeing. Like I knew Batman because I saw Batman 89 at a very young age, and I was aware of Spider-Man, and he was a guy that fought against another guy usually, or a girl, doesn't matter. But X-Men was a team of people, and I was like, oh, that's cool. So there's more than one of them, and they each have their own personalities and their own tropes, and there's something cool about each of them. But X-Men was not just a comic book at the time or an animated series. X-Men had a very popular trading card set by Topps. I think it was Topps.
All right.
And I was an avid X-Men trading card collector. Every now and then, my dad would take me to a comic shop and he would give me a little bit of money and say, you can get whatever you want in here. And there were times when I got comic books, but I got addicted to the X-Men trading cards. So when I say that was my first fandom, it was because I was super into the trading cards. I was super into the animated stuff. And I dabbled a little bit in comics. At that point in time, comics were a little bit too heavy for a little kid like me to understand. It was kind of a shift in comics in the 80s and 90s where the stories were, I think, more for people that had aged up with the X-Men. Because if you go back to the old X-Men, which I don't like the original X-Men books, yeah, I think those are for children. Yeah. And they kind of explain a lot and they're very basic. And in my opinion, the writing isn't very good, but they're for children. 80s and 90s stuff was a little bit beyond me. So it took me to get into my teen years and a little bit older to appreciate X-Men comics, which I eventually did. I've read more X-Men comics than any other superhero franchise, but that doesn't mean I'm an expert. I've just dabbled in them more. But X-Men goes way back with me. It's like one of my favorite things ever. And it's one of my first favorite fandoms.
Yeah, man. I see what you're saying about the the shift in the comics in the 80s and 90s. Things, the more cosmic based stories of the X-Men just sort of blew my mind a little bit when I was a child trying to read these comics. I'm like, yeah, I don't really know what's going on here. Like Shiva Empire, like what the hell's going on? Like, don't get me wrong. I think we'll get to it later. I wish they'd sort of went back to some of these earlier comics and maybe he's pulled a couple of things out of them for Dark Phoenix saga and stuff like that. But we'll get on to that later.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, like similar to you. But my thing would be like take out the cards and put the figures in there. So like obviously like early 2000s, late 90s, I was just like consumed by figures, all sorts of figures, figures. The Toy Biz line, these earlier X-Men films, like they were so cool, man. I haven't got any of them today or anymore, but they were sick.
This is one of my childhood favorites. This is the Age of Apocalypse Weapon X. I am rebuying my childhood toys unopened. You know, sometimes I get reissued toys, but this one is actually from the 90s and it holds a special place in my heart. I know exactly what you mean. I forgot to mention it, but the toys were huge and they're so good. These toys are so well made.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, they have such like a strong quality to them. Like I always look at toys when I go to places like Target. I'm sure you do too.
Yeah, 100%.
And the quality of modern toys isn't always up to snuff.
It's totally different now. I always like whenever I go in these shops that and to be honest, like there's not a lot of shops these days that still sell like these sort of toys. Like, well, not in the UK anyway. Like we used to have like various places like Toy Master and stuff like that. And you go in and it was just like this magical place full of all your X-Men figures, Batman figures, everything. But yeah, that was like my sort of gateway in. Like I had these figures that all looked like sort of these characters from the comics that I was reading. But then we sort of get to like 1999, 2000 and X-Men comes out, directed by Bryan Singer. Should we just get into this one, Corey?
Yeah. I mean, the release of this movie felt like it took 20 years to me because when I was a kid, time was a different concept. So like around 95, I was like, why isn't there an X-Men movie? And then 5 years later, it came out, which isn't that much time. But to me, I was like, why did it take this long? Like, you know, I had wanted this for so long, this movie, this Bryan Singer 2000 X-Men movie. and I was beyond hyped. I remember before the movie came out, going to the official website, which I don't think was something like xmen.com. It would be at the end of the trailer. It'd be like, visit X-Men the movie 1.com or whatever, you know? And this website was like, it pulled me in even more because it was like a mystery. When you go to this website, it was Professor X's mansion. And it's like it's depicted in the movie, right? So you have like the 2000s like silver halls, and then you leave a door and it goes into like the classroom wood setting of the mansion. And you're like exploring it. And it was like it was like a point and click that didn't really have anything for you to do. But to me, it was like playing Myst. I'm like, what is going on in this place? Like, where are the X-Men? Like, it was like such a mystery, but I had a 56K modem. So I basically couldn't do shit with it. I could like enter 2 rooms and that took like 3 hours, and like, that was it.
Right.
But man, so much hype for this. Like, it was everything I needed. I was like, I need an X-Men movie in my life. And by the time this came out, I was like 12 or 13. So I was still interested in the fandom.
So were you like very much aware in '99 of this film coming out?
Oh yeah. I mean, when it started getting promoted and stuff, like trailers eventually got me to the website, and they just kind of built an internal hype, you know?
So I think by the time this film actually ended up coming out in cinemas, I was 6 or 7 years old, one of the two. I think 6 years old. I'll go with that one. If this came out in 2000, I was born 94, 6. So this is like the earliest cinema experience that I remember. So basically, my mum and dad were separated, but on a weekend, like it was go and see my dad, and we'd go either go to the cinema or we'd go to the water park, whatever. But I remember going to see this, or going to try and see this film at the cinema because I think it was a 12. When this
12? What does that mean?
Right, so PG-13 maybe over there.
Okay, that I'm familiar with. What's your rating system, real quick?
So it's like PG, which is like parental guidance, then a 12, got to be 12 to go in. But they brought a 12A out where like you could go and watch it. If you're under 12, you had to be like accompanied by an adult. Then we had a 15, which was like, whoa, then you were getting into like the nitty gritty. Then 18, which is your equivalent of rated R.
That's a lot of ratings, man. That's a lot to keep track of.
Yeah, it's bullshit. That's what I say it is. It was a fucking nightmare. But anyway, we go to the cinema, and I remember being excited, obviously, like being infatuated with the X-Men cartoon, like got my eyes on a couple of comic books and stuff like that. So I sort of was aware of what we were going to watch. But yeah, man, the guy at the ticket box was like, I remember getting the tickets, actually. We ended up buying the tickets. Then before you went in the hallway with all the screen doors in and stuff, we were lined up in the queue. And I remember my dad just being really, really fucking embarrassing about the whole situation. The guy just wasn't going to let us in because I wasn't old enough to see the film. So my earliest cinema memory was X-Men, but it wasn't seeing the actual film. Like, I haven't spoken to my dad in a long time. I remember I need to bring him up and just be like, look, did we go and see that X-Men film or not? Like, I need to know. I need it counts for the future of my podcasting career. I need to know these little bits of information. But I do remember the giant kickoff in the cinema. It was terrible, mate. It was a nightmare.
This is crazy to me because I don't think there's that much bad about the X-Men movie. Like, what can't a little kid see about this?
I think what it was, right, honestly, it wasn't like a situation of Blade, which came out in 97 or 98, where I think the trailers for that were very much like, this is just a violent action movie with Wesley Snipes. I don't think anyone put two and two together that this was any sort of Marvel property at the time. However, the X-Men wasn't taking that route. They were like, this is a comic book film. But I think by the trailers and just by like some of the images that were coming out of this film, it was taking a really serious tone. Like, let's like get in the intro of this film. The intro of this film is like, we mean business, and this is a very serious tone that we're taking. Like, the whole intro with the young Magneto is pretty fucking awesome, if I'm being honest. What are your thoughts on the intro of this film?
I think a lot of the X-Men movies, you can tell their quality by the quality of the intro.
Well
Right.
said.
That it says a lot about
Yeah,
the
yeah.
movie itself.
Very true.
That's true for this one because it has a pretty good intro. And, this intro was good enough to be recaptured in another X-Men movie. They kind of redid it shot for shot. But for my money, something about this version always works better. It might be the music that's playing while the concentration camp scene is happening, but it's just a powerful scene.
Yeah.
Seeing that and like it really adds a lot to a character without necessarily having to put it into words, right? You don't have to say like, no, look, I was in a concentration camp. I know what, mobs will do to people that are different. He doesn't have to say that necessarily. Occasionally, Magneto will give a subtle line in the franchise about that. He'll be like, no, my skin has been marked before. A needle will never touch it again.
Yeah.
Subtle, perfect, great. This scene does a lot for the character and it does a lot for the storytelling, right? Because now we get to see mutants and their abilities and kind of like about the age in which they will trigger for someone and the types of scenarios in which they will trigger for someone. This isn't something they maintain throughout the franchise necessarily, or even in the comics. But in this movie, it's set up that it's usually something either like traumatic or highly emotional that triggers their first glimpse of what their mutant abilities are. And that's definitely the case for young Eric Lencher here. It's a really great scene. It's very tragic. Again, I think the best word for that scene is powerful.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah, so like when they get to a certain age, I think it's a certain time in puberty that their mutant gene sort of elaborates and come to fruition. But I like sort of you're introduced by this really serious tone in this scene, and then we move on to Rogue's intro, which is equally just as intense as that last scene. Like, I just think the movie does a really good job of like this opening and just giving you like this is the tone that we're going to be going with in this film, and it's a bit of an eye opener. It's almost verging on like slightly horror, especially with Anna Paquin's scene as Rogue, where she goes in for the kiss and the guy just goes into like a instant coma, or whatever it is. Um, but yeah, just for like an opener of a
Great. Yeah, great
superhero
things
film.
peppered in.
Yeah,
I totally agree
awesome,
with you.
awesome.
I remember at the time there being like complaints among maybe even myself. I don't remember myself exactly, but like people that were more in tune with X-Men comics, like why isn't it this era of Rogue? Because you remember 90s Rogue. 90s Rogue was something else.
Yeah,
Like fully grown woman, super hot, like basically
super hot.
they made her to basically to be like the hottest woman ever that you can't touch or you'll die. And they did that on purpose.
Oh,
But
yeah.
also she had the Miss Marvel powers and she was fucking OP in like at least in the animated series in that era of comics.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm really glad they didn't go that route because that would have been way too much for this movie. Imagine having Miss Marvel Rogue in here as just like her appearing at the school like that. It wouldn't have worked. They really made some smart decisions in retrospect, even if I did complain it at the time, which I don't remember if I did or not. But I think they dialing her back and making her power like a curse is a good thing.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, I think the writers of like, especially these first three films, wanted to use Rogue as like this, where it was like a physical, like imitation of someone who has got these mutant abilities, but she doesn't want them. She's in like a crossroads of like, I want a normal life. I don't want a normal life. I don't know, it gets more accentuated in like the first half of Last Stand where they bring the cure in. But yeah, I like Rogue. I like Rogue. She's sort of like the main focus in this first film.
Yeah, and in some cases she becomes a plot device. But
Yeah,
if we're gonna talk about intros, this is probably my favorite thing about this movie. And even the worst X-Men movies have something that's great about them.
yeah,
Every X-Men movie does. This one has a few. Some of the better movies have a few, but even the worst have at least one. But one of the things that's great about this movie is the introduction of everyone's favorite 90s character from the X-Men, and that's Wolverine.
yeah, man.
His introduction
Awesome.
is fucking beautiful. It's a goddamn thing of beauty. I still get the chills when I see it. We see this guy, he's like an animal in a cage, and Wolverine's hair varies throughout the franchise, but this is some good Wolverine hair because it's extra bushy, and
Yeah,
they
man.
went for that. And they found a way to make that ridiculous comic haircut translate into real life. Because you know how it goes. It kind of goes up like horns almost. And I always wondered, like, how the fuck could that be possible? They did it subtly enough where it's like his hair kind of waves up on the sides. That's fine. He's got the bushy beard, but he's a man fighting in a cage that has no idea where he is or what he's doing. Well, he doesn't know his past. He's just a man like, getting by, and that's how he does it. He uses the things he knows. And afterwards, he smokes a cigar and drinks beer. But that's just a perfect intro to him, just seeing him in the cage. And this was a controversial casting, apparently. My buddy Steve from Big Dumb Movie is still mad about it because he's too tall. I don't give a fuck. This guy is Wolverine.
Yeah, 100%. He's absolutely made this character his own, like over the last 20 years. I think it's amazing. Who did you hear who was supposed to be in the running for Wolverine? Who they
Glenn
had?
Danzig?
Is that the guy from Mission Impossible 2? Was that his name?
No, that's a different guy. But Glenn Danzig was one of the guys that was considered, apparently. So,
Oh,
you know,
right.
Glenn Danzig is a singer, right? From Danzig and the Misfits.
Oh,
Right?
right.
He
Yeah,
was
yeah.
asked how he would have done Wolverine differently. And he said, I would have done it less gay, which is like
What does that
small
even mean?
brain response.
Jesus,
Like,
yes. That's a small man syndrome fucking
yeah.
response. Jesus. But yeah, there was obviously him and the guy out the villain in Mission Impossible. I can't remember what the hell his name is now, but like
The villain from the worst Mission Impossible movie.
yes, correct. Yes. I don't mind Mission Impossible too. Wow, yes.
No, I know who he is, but he's like generic Mick bad guy. Like he's not a particularly memorable actor. Then again, maybe neither was Hugh Jackman until he got this role because no one knew the name Hugh Jackman until this movie came out.
I don't think I was old enough to be aware of who any of these people were, to be honest. I sort of just had like I recognized a couple of them, but obviously like Ian
Patrick
McKellen,
Stewart.
yeah, Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen and stuff, but like yeah, there wasn't anybody really that stood out, and Hugh Jackman was definitely like an unknown to me at watching it at that point. But I thought he was, yeah, he was unbelievable. Like wasn't like a thought process that went through my head of like, oh, he's too short, he's too tall. Sorry, that just wasn't a thing, and I think he's just made it his own. But
Oh,
yeah,
he's absolutely great as this. You know, he fits exactly the way he's written perfectly. He has all like the Wolverine isms where
yeah,
like, you know, like he's sniffing around and he's looking and he's saying bub and he's
yeah.
highly aggressive and he's just generally hostile, but you know, he's kind of like a there's some good in his heart as well. And you know, it's Wolverine. He's kind of like on the fence between like wanting to like rip people to pieces and do the right thing.
Almost an anti-hero. It's not exactly an anti-hero, but
Yeah.
he's on like
Yeah,
the
no, he is.
verge.
He is.
But yeah, man.
My
It's quite
all-time favorite X-Men character, by the way, or one of my all-time favorite comic book characters is Wolverine.
yeah.
So he's a big deal for me, right? His presence in this movie was a wise choice, and it was pretty much required for fans like me. Like it needs to be basically about Wolverine.
Of
And
course it does.
they made that true in a lot of them, which is good, I think.
Yeah, it was a good move. I think it's a good move for like the first three of them. I don't know whether it's necessarily a massively good move in Days of Future Past, but we'll get there. Um,
We will get there, yes. We'll
yeah,
talk about
eventually. But
some things that I don't quite understand about that movie.
I just want to say, like, just as like a overall thing, like this movie isn't got loads of action in it. Once I noticed that on the last rewatch, it's not like an action heavy movie. It's got a few decent set pieces, but it's more just like I don't know, like if this wasn't an X-Men film, it'd be like this sort of mystery slash horror sort of situation. Like one scene that always gets me, maybe it's not now because the effects haven't aged that well, but the Senator Kelly, who's obviously like one of the antagonists in this first film, who's very anti-mutant. But the bit where Magneto like catches him and he's got him prisoner, and like he's just went through the machine that Magneto's got, and he's looking through them bars in prison, and just starts squeezing himself through the bars. I was like, oh no, what the hell is going on here? And that beach scene, the beach scene where he just gets out of the ocean, he's like, the first shot of him, like you can see the sort of the cuts in his skin and stuff from where he's like fell like in the coral, like in, mate, that whole sequence of that beach really fucked me up back in the day. Still,
I bet that's probably a lot for a little kid. Maybe that's why it was rated PG-12 or whatever.
This is what I mean. I just like that's what sort of the argument I would have about the rating and why it was a 12. Like there is just a few little things in there that you takes it back a little bit if you're a kid. But yeah, this wasn't trying to aim for kids. This was trying to aim for like a broader demographic than that. Hence the black leather, man, and not the yellow spandex.
Yeah.
What happened there?
They got a lot of shit for that, and it's really never stopped, like the amount of shit they got for that. But at the time, I remember thinking like this works. Like Wolverine's costume, especially in the 90s, is insane. It's basically pure yellow.
Yeah.
That is not a costume that you can easily transition into a movie like this that's as serious as it is, especially at a time where comic book movies were basically dead. Maybe if you made this dumb like Batman and Robin, you could have a costume like that, but not in this movie. It just doesn't work. If you kept everything exactly the same and gave him a yellow costume, it would be very jarring.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you would lose people straight away. They'd be like going in thinking, "Oh, we've got to watch the Phantom here," or what? Like, what the hell's going on? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Dumb them colors down a little bit, baby. But now in 2023, give me all them colors. I want them all.
I know. We're in a different landscape now.
Totally.
But you said there's not a lot of action in this movie, and that is very true. It is a down. It is a problem. I'll say it's a problem with this movie. It's not the movie's downfall. It's a problem.
No.
There's a lot to do in this movie, so I can see why, in terms of story, they don't have too many action beats. But the train station scene, to me, is amazing.
I had that wrote down. So basically, I say an hour in, pretty much no action, but then we get to an awesome sequence in the train station. It's this is cool, man. This feels X-Men when
absolutely, especially with Cyclops when he gets his visor taken off, and it's one of the few times in this whole franchise that you get to see the extent of his power, because Cyclops's power is understated even in the comics a lot of cases, but when he unleashes, it's epic. And his blast through the top of the train station is insane. And the villains are scared when that happens. Yeah. Toad flicks off his visor and it shoots, and they're like, holy shit. Okay, let's not do that. There's some really great stuff there. It's one of the few times where Professor X is in the field. These first three movies have a tendency to dispatch Professor X and to get him out of the movie so that he's not a player in any major end scene of the movie in terms of like final battle time. Let's get Professor X. Now he's taken out every time. That's true for this movie too. But at this point, he shows up and he helps. And I kind of like the showdown between him and Magneto as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the Magneto scene just as he's coming out of the train station and he's got all the police cars in front of him. I think that's just like an awesome looking scene. With that many cars and stuff, all the effects look pretty good for the time. They still look pretty good today. Like on the most recent rewatch, yeah, some of the effects aren't great, but that whole train sequence is pretty amazing. And especially when like Magneto follows Wolverine on the train, and there's that whole sort of disposition with him like up in the middle of the train car. I don't know. It's just a cool sequence, man. It's a cool sequence.
I have very few issues with the special effects in these movies. I think they stand up really well. Maybe I'm too forgiving because these movies are special to me, but I think the special effects, with some exceptions that I'll bring up later, are really great. Cyclops' optic blasts are great. Storm's lightning is great. The the magnetism effects are always awesome, right? When you see Magneto like tear something apart, it's like it's so much force behind it. Like the physics of the metal getting torn when Magneto does it, it's like it feels real.
And it sounds great as well. Great sound design on some of these. But yeah, as far as this like first movie goes, like on my latest rewatch, it doesn't hold up as well as what it used to maybe 10 years ago. I think we're just in a different landscape now. But for the time it's a solid number. It's a good gateway and a very early sort of model of what future MCU movies would take formula wise and whatnot. But
It has a lot to do, and it what they do with the villains is questionable, I think, at times. For example, Toad gets murked, and he gets murked in the dumbest possible way, right? With Storm. Toad, first of all, in this movie is actually a fucking badass.
very
A lot of people hate on Toad. He's always like a disposable villain in the comics that like Wolverine just kicks his ass or someone else just kicks his ass. But he's a really good fighter. He's a good example of like if you had grown up your whole life with these powers, you would be really adept at using them.
Yeah.
Right? His tongue, his agility, all that stuff. So he is like way more practiced than even like the X-Men are. They're like nervous. It's like their first time in the field. He is ready to go, and he kicks the shit out of basically the whole group.
Yeah.
This is also a new Mystique, right? Mystique in this movie and in the other movies is not the Mystique I remember from the cartoons and the comics. She is slippery as fuck, and she uses her like morphing abilities to help her fight. And it's not apparent right away, but as you watch the movies, you kind of get that vibe. Like, why is she always sliding around? It's because of like her skin, I imagine, is like transforming into like something that helps her do that. And she's able to like kind of morph her body in a way where she has slightly more agility. Sabretooth, first of all, Sabretooth has silver fillings in his teeth in the train station scene when he opens his mouth and he looks up to the sky. So I'm wondering, like, who's his dentist? He goes to a dentist. Sabretooth sits down in a dental chair and like the dentist is like, so have you been flossing? And he's like, no.
That guy ain't going to no dentist, man. No dentist. No.
That Magneto did
it. Yeah, man. Just keep it all in school. Just keep it all indoors, man. You don't let your brotherhood go to dentists and get dodgy treatment. But
maybe he's a mutant dentist. He's got a PPO insurance that you don't know about insurance. Yeah, he's got a good plan with the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants.
I tell you what, though, I don't mind this Sabretooth in this movie. I think he's pretty intimidating. He has nothing sort of like anything to say at all.
Scream for me.
He's played by Michael Myers from the Rob Zombie Halloween movie.
I was gonna say Nick Castle, but that's the original.
Yeah, no, it's in Rob Zombie's brilliant remake. But yeah, man, Sabretooth not got a lot to do.
And it's not this movie's fault, but the continuity of these movies is fucked.
Mate, can we even get into the like? We can't even go down that path. We can't go down continuity path because this is like it looks like the Matrix Code, the continuity path of the X-Men films.
Yeah, all I see is blonde, brunette, redhead.
Yeah. I can't break that code right now. I can't do it. I was going to message you before the pod and be like, yeah, so mate, what? How are we going to talk about the where these films are set and where, mate? We can't get there. We can't do it.
You basically can't. Yeah, it's it would be funny if Sabretooth said, "We're brothers, Jimmy," and then like there's no explanation until X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Oh yeah, we're not there yet, but I've got to say I do sort of one of the very, very few things I do like about X-Men Origins is the Sabretooth portrayal in that, but we'll get there.
This particular Sabretooth, though, going back to this movie, he looks the part pretty well, I think. So like he looks like what an adaptation of Sabretooth could look like, at least in this era. The classic Sabretooth is I think different as a character because this is just like the bruiser guy, right? And he's not as like crazy and vicious as Sabretooth is and as he's portrayed in some of the other movies. But I think he looks pretty good for being that character. He's defeated, Mystique is defeated, Toad is defeated. Again, I hate that line that you do know what happens when a toad gets struck by lightning. Same thing that happens to everything else. It's like, even at the time, I remember everyone was like, what the fuck? Like,
what the fuck? Was that a line that was just said? Excuse me.
Yeah.
What? But yeah, man. I don't think I've got anything more to go down. Overall, a decent movie for its time. You remember this one a little bit more than me, but like as in hype levels and stuff. It's X-Men 2 that I remember the hype for that one. But yeah, should we segue into the next film?
Couple final thoughts. And this is kind of going to be a recurring theme.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, one won't be. One is that I remember seeing this movie and I had the biggest crush on Anna Paquin.
Okay.
She's like 4 years older than me. So she's like the perfect age for me to be crushing on. I was way into her. But that aside, something that's going to be a recurring theme is I remember finishing this movie and being like, all right, next movie, they're definitely going to be the X-Men. Because that's what you don't get in a lot of the X-Men movies. It's like, all right, they're going to be the X-Men now.
Yeah.
Every movie ends with, next one, they'll be the X-Men. It's like, all right, we kind of had like we're going to meet. The group is going to meet together. They're going to do a mission. They're figuring things out. They can't really fight that well. But next time for sure. At least that's what's going on in my head. Some of the movies even set it up that way specifically, where it ends with, next time they're going to be the X-Men. Stay tuned.
It's like they knew. It's like they already knew, like, fucking hell, guys, we've done like 7 films and we haven't like actually had any proper X-Men team action going on. Maybe we should sort that one out. But yeah, we get there eventually. Maybe it doesn't even happen in this next film, but
no, it does not. X-Men 2 United.
So X-Men 2, I can remember the hype for this one. So this is 2003. I am 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm like 9, 10 years old by the time this one's coming out. I'm definitely going to cinema to watch this one. I remember going to see it at the cinema. And I remember the posters specifically about really shit posters. It was just an X and a 2. I think this was one of them superhero films that had like 3 different names, I think it went by. So in the UK, it was known as just X2. I don't know whether in the US it was known as X-Men United. I don't know if that rings a bell for you or not.
Yeah, it's X2 : X-Men United.
Right, cool. Yeah, we just had the X2 over here. But yeah, I remember this film coming out. I remember hype levels was big, obviously, because people really had connected to that first movie. And if I'm not mistaken, did Sam Raimi's Spider-Man come out in 2002?
I think it came out in 2001.
2001. Okay. So it was like, we were in like a time in 2003 where I think the realization of superheroes films being massive blockbusters and quite well written ones at that. I'm obviously not taking into account Batman 89 and stuff like that. They're sort of a period of their own time and place, but as more broad strokes of getting everyone at the cinema, I think, and writing some really good films. I think the first X-Men, it's a competent, well-written film. Then Spider-Man comes out and it's like, holy shit, these films can be like really epic. I think by the time X2 comes out, I remember reading about it in an Empire magazine. Not reading about it, but looking at the images and going, oh my God, Nightcrawler's coming. Like, it was really exciting. It just felt like I need to add, by the way, like some of these films, not all of them, but had like ties, like promotion ties into fast food chains and stuff like that. And this one was with Burger King, if I remember right. You get your Burger King thing and it had all the characters on like the back of the box. And I always just was going insane for the fact Nightcrawler was going to be in the movie. I think just because he's so visually different. It was just exciting. But yeah,
Nightcrawler was one of my favorite characters from X-Men. I loved the idea of his powers and what he did with them. The fact that like he can teleport around people and he's super athletic and agile. And he would do this move that we don't see in this movie, but we do see another teleporter do it in another movie where he'd grab someone, teleport up in the air, let go, and then teleport back down. And he just drops motherfuckers to the ground. And I love that. I'm like, what do you do against that? You know, Nightcrawler, his power set is really cool. And he's like such like a cool, humble guy. And I think his character in the movies, even the other iterations of Nightcrawler, is a pretty good match in terms of his personality. In the same way that Wolverine is a good match for his personality. He's just like a religious, humble guy that wants to do the right thing. You know, I think he's a big standout in the opening scene of this movie.
oh my God, mate. Jesus. Right. Is this the best intro to any X-Men film?
It has to be.
It's
one of the best scenes in all of X-Men.
Yeah, so I had it written down. Like, not only is I think it's the best intro of this franchise, at the time, it was one of the best intros to any movie that I'd seen. It was just like, it was nuts. And it's like the level of intensity and like the effects that are going on like that. I watched the scene today before we did this pod, and like the effects still hold up really well in that scene.
They look amazing.
Yeah, visually stunning. Like, I think that's what Morbius was trying to go for, but just didn't happen. X2 did it better, baby. But yeah, man.
The smoke.
Yeah, the smoke. It just visually looks great.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They came up with something new for this because the way I remember Nightcrawler's teleport was like a small explosion, right? And in this movie, it's like it almost like sounds like the Bamf in the comic too when he teleports.
Yes, like literally takes that page and puts it to screen pretty well. Like the transcribes great, transposes really well.
Seeing him go through the White House and take out all of the Secret Service is just incredible. Like he kicks one guy and then he teleports to another portion of the screen and he like kicks another guy. And while he's still doing the kick, he goes to another guy. It takes him all the way to the Oval Office where all the remaining security guys are in there. And he just takes them out one at a time with his beautiful, like operatic music playing. Yes. And it's just like, wow, how can anyone fuck with this guy? It's just incredible. And, you know, when you're watching it and if you know the Nightcrawler, you're like, why is he doing this? Like, what happened to Nightcrawler? Why is he taking out these people? There's got to be a good reason. And, you know, we find out later why. The downside to this is that this is really the only standout Nightcrawler moment in the whole movie.
It's really annoying. It's really well played by Alan Cummins. That I didn't really know much of him. I think I knew him from Spy Kids, maybe. He's
GoldenEye.
Oh shit, yeah, GoldenEye.
Yeah, he's Boris in GoldenEye. You know, made famous from the game.
Yes,
GoldenEye. But yeah, I knew him from that. He's a actor that I've always loved. I remember back in the day, I used to go on IMDb forums and like read a lot about just people's conversations about these movies. And I was really hyped for X3. And I remember reading about why isn't Nightcrawler returning for X3? And there was, of course, tons of joke answers. But my favorite joke answer was, this is the reason. And then it showed a picture. And it was a picture of Ian McKellen and Alan Cumming in a hot tub, seemingly naked. I don't know. They might be wearing shorts. And they're both looking at the camera with drinks in their hands, smiling.
That sounds amazing. I will find that photo and put it up as we're speaking right now. But I need to see that photo.
I'm sniffling. I was like on the verge of saying I'm too sick to do this podcast, but I'm feeling better today. So
cool.
For the audience, if you hear me sniffle, I'm going to try to do it away from the mic as much as possible. I know it's annoying. I'm very sorry.
Yeah, no dramas, mate. No dramas. It's okay. But thanks for coming on and powering through, though.
Oh, absolutely. I'm here for it, you know. X2 has some really great stuff. The greatness of this movie is almost undercut by the fact that the villains and the heroes have to team up. I didn't want that. I went into this not wanting that. I was
Not
like, no, I
movie
want to
two.
see them fight each other.
Yeah, 100%. It was just too quick. It was. I'm glad you bring that up. It was a bone of contention when I was watching it, and still to this day, like, yeah, they team up in this movie, and I think it's just sort of too quick. We've took a lot of good storylines out there already. But I will say though, I don't mind William Stryker as the villain in this film, played by second best Hannibal Lecter, Brian Cox.
Who's
I,
number one? Mads?
no,
No.
I haven't watched that show. Do you recommend it?
It's good. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, yeah. I've got a mate on Instagram who keeps telling me to watch that one. But yeah, Brian Cox. I like Brian Cox.
Right. No, I like Stryker. I like his involvement in the movies. I think he's I'm kind of on the fence of saying he's in the movies too often. And on the other side, he shows up sometimes and I'm like, oh shit, it's Stryker. All right. So
Yeah,
I like that, they flesh out Wolverine's backstory a little bit more. You definitely needed that. I just don't love how like Professor X and Cyclops are taken out, and now the heroes got to join up with Magneto and them. Like, to me, it works in the movie, but it's just not what I wanted going into the movie.
no, you're right. I'm going to save my Cyclops rant for later on. I'm going to save that one for next film. But there's a Cyclops rant coming up. Sorry, definitely.
I'll talk about Cyclops a little bit right now.
Yeah, go.
I'll say that this version of Cyclops I like better than the later version of Cyclops. I'll talk more about that in a little bit, but it's mostly because he's a dick.
Yeah.
And he's a dick to Logan, and therefore we feel like he's being a dick to us because Logan is everyone's like kind of point of view character. He's obviously the main character of these movies, right? Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. So the fact that he's a dick to him, to me, like I've always kind of seen Cyclops as a dick.
He's a Boy Scout.
He's a Boy Scout, but he's also kind of an asshole. Like, yeah. So I think that works, but he doesn't have a lot to do in these movies. And that's, I think, why he's so easily dispatched to the next one without much reaction from the fans.
I'll just get into it now then. I think it's a massive crying shame that Cyclops has had this. He's been done fucking dirty in this franchise, especially these first three films. And, James Marsden, like, I think he's pretty good in the role if they just sort of give him some stuff to do. But I think, as we were saying earlier, like, a lot of these films aren't, like, good, quote-unquote, X-Men films. There's not a lot of, like, quote unquote X-Men action in these films. And I think, it's a shame that we got like Ty Sheridan playing like the younger version of Cyclops in the later films. Because I feel like he had slightly more to do in them films. Not a great deal more, but yeah, I just think it's like aesthetically and stuff, like James Marsden, like he looked great as Cyclops and stuff. And he had the Boy Scout, I'm a dick thing down to a T. Like I love the interactions with Logan and Cyclops. They don't happen a lot, but like which movie is it where I can't remember which one it is, but he's just like, oh, is it you? And he's like, oh, it's the first one. He's like, you're a dick. He's like, yeah. I love it. But yeah, James Marsden and Cyclops just as a character in the whole X-Men franchise, old and new, totally shit on as a character. And I'm hoping later on with the MCU sort of rectifies that whole thing.
X2, I think, is kind of top heavy in terms of its quality. It's a great movie. I like it a lot. I often tell people it's one of the best.
Yeah.
But after the Nightcrawler scene, one of the other great scenes, which I think is under the first half hour or at least within the first 45 minutes, is when Wolverine is watching over the mansion.
Yeah, man.
He's the only adult present. Everyone else is off doing something important. Wolverine is there watching the students. Stryker sends in what is basically like a military SWAT team to apprehend the mutants. because they kind of found out that they have this high-tech jet at their facility, and the president authorizes, okay, let's go question some people. They send in these SWAT guys, and this is where we get the first proper Wolverine, maybe, where he is just killing motherfuckers. When he kills that guy in the kitchen, chills, man. He's struggling with the guy, and then the claws pop out, and he pushes him against the fridge and claws right into the chest. And I remember watching it at the time, and I think I might have said out loud, okay, we're getting proper Wolverine now. Like, hell yeah. We got to get it. We got a good intro to him in the last movie, but this time we get to see him in action. This dude has some fodder. You need fodder for Wolverine. You need guys for him to cut through. In a lot of cases, it's robots. In this case, it's actual people. And he basically clears this house of them.
Yeah. Surely that's got to be like the moment for a lot of people that were like apprehensive about Hugh Jackman taking the role. As soon as them claws going at that guy in the fridge and he's just screaming in his face, that's got to be like, well, here we go. Let's go. Mate, that sequence is so good. So good. It's just really good. Like, it's just nice hanging about in like the mansion as well. Just like when he goes into the living room, the little kid's like on the couch and he's like turning the TV channels with blinking his eyes and stuff. Just little things like that. And when he's in the kitchen and he gives his drink to Bobby and Iceman, he freezes his drink. Just little bits like that I love.
The little bits are good, where they use their powers for like mundane things, because they would. The Fantastic Four movies, they do that, but that's like the whole movie. They just use their powers for mundane things.
Very true. That is all them films are.
Until there's like a big action scene at the end. But I like how he goes into the kitchen and he's like, is there any beer? Like, it's just like classic Wolverine.
Yeah. Brilliant.
And Wolverine is very accepting of mutants, and I like that mutants are accepting of each other, because he says to the kid, don't you sleep? And the kid goes, I don't sleep. Wolverine's like, all right, fair enough. Like, he's never like what's your power, like why, like they don't kind of question that stuff. You can tell he's been on like the fringes of society enough to where when there's another mutant, he's very accepting. Like when he meets Rogue, she says, when people touch me, it hurts them. He's like, all right, I won't touch you then. Like, easy enough. Small touches like that.
Little touches. They just make for a better X-Men movie, I find.
There's another pretty epic moment.
Yeah, go.
Oh, do you want to go ahead?
No, go for it.
Yeah, Magneto's escape scene is epic.
Oh shit, it is epic.
Why don't you take it? I'll go after you.
Right. Do you want me to take this scene? Do you want me to get into this scene a little bit? Right. It's a bit of a weird one because it's like I had so many thoughts at this scene when I was a younger man. Firstly, Mystique is pretty fit. I'm not gonna lie. She looks pretty epic. If I was that cop, there was no I'd be in that toilet, mate. I'd have failed.
I'd be way too suspicious. I'd be like, why is a woman like you going after a guy like me?
I would totally agree, but it was the pattern on a dress, mate. It looked, it didn't look great. It looked pretty cheap to me. So I was like, okay, then maybe these standards are going to pan out. I don't know, but yeah, mate. This whole scene where Mystique is obviously like infiltrates this prison. Well, she doesn't infiltrate the prison. She gets one of the guards and injects him with liquidized metal that he later takes into the prison scene with Magneto, who's held in a plastic prison. And I just love this scene because it's so intense with Cyclops in waiting for Xavier. Who is this the same scene?
Yeah, there's a lot of tension. Well, no, it's not the same scene actually. It's close to it, but there is a lot of tension in both scenes. Like when you're in Magneto's prison with him, there's like, what's going to happen here? And they do that wonderfully, I think, with like the music that kind of like swells as things start to build. But it's very close to that scene.
100%. It's just a great scene. It's a great look at Magneto's powers and the extent of what he can do with so little.
That's exactly what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
With the tiniest bit of metal, he is unstoppable.
Yeah.
He's so practiced.
Yeah.
And we see that in the movies where he's played by Michael Fassbender as well. Like this guy, has dedicated his life to perfecting his craft, and he is so good with it. If you give this guy a little bit of metal, you are fucked.
Yeah.
And I've always said, like, I remember having arguments with people when I was younger about like Magneto is basically unstoppable. And people said, no, he's just good against Wolverine because of the adamantium. And I'm like, no, 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 no. He could do that to anyone with a magnetic field. Like, he can either create a magnetic field. He basically has a limited form of telekinesis if there's metal within his vicinity. But also, what he can do with metal is like a gun times 100. Like, you see that with those little metal balls.
Yeah.
Like, if he had a gun, he could shoot a hole in the plastic case. But with the magnetism he has, with the control he has, the balls are just flying all over until the whole place is destroyed, and he just flies right out on top of one of them. It's so cool.
Really cool, man. Really cool. Where else do we want to go with this? Oh, yeah, Corey, this is what I wanted to ask you about this film. And it sort of branches out into the next film as well. And maybe it's into a solo film. So, what are your thoughts on this sort of love triangle situation between Wolverine, Jean Grey, and Cyclops?
It's classic.
Do you think it adds anything to these movies? Do you think like it maybe brings the movies down? Like my thing was that I don't really like it in this film, but in the next film, I think it really sort of packs a little bit of an emotional punch near the end. But wasn't a super fan of it in this film. But what were your thoughts?
I mean, I think it's done very well throughout, and it carries over to a lot of movies, like Wolverine's love for Jean Grey. And I do believe that he has these feelings for her, and I think she has something for him as well, but it's never quite stated. And you see a lot of that in the comics as well. Wolverine and Cyclops both love Jean, but she is with Cyclops.
Yeah.
And it's hard for him. It adds a lot to Wolverine's like inner turmoil, because like he wants this thing he can't have, and he just has to swallow it and deal with it. I will say this though, because I did want to talk about it. It's slightly related. When Mystique goes into Wolverine's tent as Jean, and he says no, stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. Yeah, why did he say fucking no? She's like, I can be anything you want. And she like transforms into Jean. It's kind of weird. I think she transforms into Rogue for a split second. And I'm like, what is that about?
Yeah, a little bit weird.
That's like, he's not like, she's kind of like a daughter figure to him. So that it's weird that happens. It's weird that they kept that. But that aside, fucking idiot.
I think that sort of just like insinuates the sort of person Mystique is. She is a bit naughty, so I could see her doing that. Do you know what I mean? Like,
she is naughty, isn't she?
I'll see if this works. I know it's
he could have just said, turn into you as a non-blue woman. You know what? Even blue. Mystique, Mystique can get it.
Slam him.
She's like Scorpina, she can get it.
Yeah, man. Yeah. She's one of these women that she could beat me up and I'd be totally fine with it.
She does a lot of like, there's a lot of like foot control with Mystique. I feel like she's using her feet a lot.
Oh, and yeah.
It's like,
mate, Q2, you'd be all over it, mate. Q2,
right.
Just be like, yeah, mate, you
give me those blue toes.
You give me those blue toes. Yeah, man, totally. But yeah, another sort of scene I want to bring up in this movie before we sort of move on is like, I really like the scene in Bobby's house. It sort of gives you like a really good look at what sort of the normies that are not mutants in this world think of mutants. So it gives a good look at the dichotomy between obviously Bobby and his parents that have only just found out that their son's a mutant. I think that whole trade-off with the police and stuff, and I don't know, just the like ferociousness of the cop shooting Wolverine point blank in the head is just like, whoa, it's heavy. But yeah,
there's some really good stuff in that scene. Absolutely,
that whole sequence is really good, and like obviously like the jealous brother ringing the police and snitching on them. Basically, I really like that scene.
mutants have always been like an oppressed kind of underclass of people.
Yeah.
That's the way they're portrayed. And people have different interpretations of what it's based on. I think if you're going based on the time it was written, it had to do with like segregation in America. It was like race based, in my opinion. I don't know if that was ever been confirmed, but I think X-Men goes back to like the 50s or 60s. So that kind of lines up with like what was the class of people being oppressed uniquely in America at the time. In this, I feel like it has to do more with like gay people, at least in terms of this scene, because she straight up says, "Have you tried not being a mutant?" Which to me kind of like rings like how a parent might treat a gay son or daughter that they have that they don't agree with, that what they consider to be a lifestyle choice, right? It's like, well, have you tried like just like not doing that? Like completely being ignorant to the fact that this is inherent to who I am,
Absolutely. Come on. I think it definitely was like a sort of, for the comics anyway, like a look at making the X-Men sort of different minorities of people, I suppose. I think the movie after that Bobby sequence, and we go to what is the prison that that Wolverine is? Oh my God, what is
The dam,
the dam? What is the dam called?
Alkali Lake.
Yes, Alkaline Lake. Just before we go any further, I want to jump back to the start of the movie. Can you remember that really dodgy scene of like it must have been a reshoot of Wolverine when he's like checking out the dam and he's like, oh, it's not operational anymore, but he's got the worst headpiece of hair you've ever seen. It doesn't look like anything from the other movies whatsoever. It's really bad and it really jarred me back then. Nothing's changed. It looks shit, man. It looks terrible. But anyway,
That's a good observation.
hey, I know it's that hairpiece, man. Not cool. Not cool. But yeah, jumping back to Alkali Lake at the end of the movie, we've got like almost a straight up like hour of sort of like non-stop sort of action. Not the greatest action. There's nothing of like any big showdowns happen apart from a killer showdown with Wolverine and what was her name again?
Lady Deathstrike.
Lady Deathstrike. That's awesome. That whole scene, how grimy it is. It's like it's in the place where we've been getting a lot of flashbacks with Wolverine in this film, which I will say, like, really well done. Like they look really violent and horrible and vicious when you're in them flashbacks.
A truly traumatic experience in his life. Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. And you definitely get that from them. So when we have this showdown in the place where you've been having these flashbacks, just an awesome scene.
I think there's really great kind of like backdrops in that set. Like you said, the set itself is a major highlight of that scene.
Yeah.
The thing with Lady Deathstrike is like she's just there in the movie. Like she basically has, because she's under mind control, she has no personality. And to me, that's kind of an excuse.
Yeah.
Like she has no personality because, she's under mind control. Okay, whatever. How'd she get there? Who is she? What is she like? How did Stryker find her? I don't know, I guess. But it's a opportunity for Wolverine to fight someone that's somewhat on his playing field.
Yeah.
So he's kind of fighting his equal. There are some really great moments when like they slash something and like it falls to pieces. Like they slash a pillar and like you can see like how strong the adamantium is. Yeah. And Wolverine's claws in these movies just looked amazing. If the claws were done wrong, it would take away a lot from these movies. But the fact that they look so good, I always wondered how they do that too, because what I remember of Wolverine is the claws coming out from the top right here. And in this movie, they make it come out from the knuckles, which looks really good. And they look firm and strong. A lot of things in these movies and in the comics make no sense. Like, how are they in there? Doesn't make any sense, right? It doesn't matter. It's just one of those things you have to forgive. How can Storm control the weather with her genetics? I don't know. It's whatever. You have to forgive those things. You accept those things going in. If the rest of the movie's done well enough, you can bypass them.
100%. 100%. I thought in the first movie they looked really good. Like the first shot of them, like they definitely took a lot of time where you actually see it come out of the skin really slowly, where he's got the guy at the bar in the first sequence. Really epic. Really epic. One thing I sort of wanted to mention before I finish my thoughts on this film is this film has a different score than the first one. It's a lot more developed. I think they understood by film number two is that like we need a decent superhero theme because Spider-Man's got a sick one that Danny Elfman produced at the time. And obviously a lot of people remember the X-Men animated series score. So they have a brilliant motif at the start of this film that sort of carries on for the rest of the films. Really appreciate it. Just wanted to get that one in there. But
How did your jacket disappear?
holy shit.
You're an X-Man.
Hey, it's my mutant gene. It just I just hit puberty 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, you have a useless power like a few people in this next movie.
Yeah, it's like like Bruce Almighty, when he poof, I can do that. It just disappears. But yeah, any more ending closing thoughts on X2?
Jean dies, which is a setup for the next movie, obviously. I remember talking to some friends that saw this and they were like, I can't believe Jean is gone. And I'm like, yeah, Jean's definitely not gone. She's going to be in the very next movie.
Yeah. And that next movie brings us along to 2006. This one was released, X-Men The Last Stand, directed by Brett Ratner. Yeah, this
not
film,
Bryan Singer.
Not Bryan Singer. No, not the other one that we can't really speak about for some reason. But
apparently he wanted to do Superman more or something, right? So he did Superman Returns. He said, I'm taking Cyclops with me. So you only get to shoot with him for 2 days.
Oh, yeah. And that's pretty evident in this film as well.
Real quick, let me talk about the lead up to this movie.
Yeah,
because
go for it, man.
I was so fucking hyped for this movie. It's one of the most hyped I've ever been for any movie ever.
Yep.
I was ready because, like I said before, I was like, the next one, they're going to be the X-Men for sure. It has to be in the third one, right? They didn't really do it in the first one. They kind of did. They only dabbled in it. The second one, they had to team up with the villain, so they weren't quite the X-Men. But in the third one, they're going to be the X-Men. And coming off the back of the second one, I was like, I can see that they're getting better. The first one was pretty good. Second one was really good. Third one is going to be it. This one's going to hit. Later on, the X-Men movies do tell you that the third movie in any franchise is the worst. So I didn't have the foresight to know that, but it is something they drop on you a little bit later. But that aside, I saw the first showing of this movie in the morning, which was like at 11 a.m. I think this was before like a Thursday night release was a thing. Because now when a movie comes out, you can see it late night on Thursday, at least out here.
Yeah.
At the time, it was a Friday release, and I went to the earliest Friday release. So I saw it in the morning. And I just remember thinking, like, this movie is missing a lot, and it's incomplete, and it's not good. Those were my two big takeaways from this movie. We'll go into the specifics later, but I was not at all happy. It was a huge letdown for me.
I definitely remember this film coming out. I remember going to see it at the cinema. I went to see it with my best friend, Teddy B. If you're listening, that's your shout out. There you go, mate.
What up, Ted?
Teddy B. Yeah, we went to see it. I remember the day. It was a sunny day. Went in, pretty packed theater, to be honest. Came out, and yeah, there was just like an air of disappointment, and I couldn't really put my finger on it. It just felt different. It felt different from the other two movies for whatever reason. Almost felt like it had less of a budget, which I'm sure it didn't. But yeah, initial thought coming out of the film was disappointment. However, in later on, and like today, there's definitely parts about this film that I do enjoy, and I think it nails. Like you just mentioned there, like none of these films really feel like X-Men films at any point. But I will give this one credit when that bridge scene happens in San Francisco, and it's like that whole end battle. Like, yeah, I think that's pretty X-Men to me, to be fair. it's not great. It's not great. There's some horrible one-liners and stuff like that, but yeah, I do appreciate that third act. I know I'm in a minority there. But yeah, this one, what do we think about the intro to this one? Because
Bad
this one,
sign.
yeah, not a
Bad
great
sign in the
intro.
intro, man. The de-aged. Before that was a developed technology, Professor X and Eric Lencher.
Yeah, not great.
I don't think it works very well, and I don't particularly like that scene. It's for the it's to service the story of Jean's true power, which is important to the story, but it's not an interesting first scene.
No. The only reason I give it any props is because it gives credence to a sequence later on in the film that I really love. One of my favorite scenes of the whole franchise.
Okay,
I'll be in a minority with that
let's
one.
go into that. Which one?
It's the house scene. So it's the second time we go to Jean's house, and it's the ultimate demise of Patrick Stewart. Um, that whole scene I love. I don't know whether it's the score playing tricks on me at the time because it's like really emotional, really powerful. But there's so much going on in that one sequence of like I like how the fight choreography is between like Juggernaut and Wolverine and stuff. I like that Storm's getting a good go in, and while all this is happening, you've just got like for me a proper emotional scene with Professor X and Jean Grey and Magneto, and when he ultimately gets dusted in that scene. I don't know, man. There's a lot there to like for me personally. I remember seeing it in the cinema, and I remember like I thought, oh my god, I'm a little bit choked up. Like, I don't know what's going on. Like Professor X, they've just killed him. Like what the fuck? That's pretty insane. I thought like they had a bit of balls for killing the character off in the movie, but after that, sort of just falls off a fucking cliff for me, to be honest. I can appreciate the last scene in the film, that third act with the giant battle, but it's more on just like a spectacle sort of approach. I will
Magneto's
say,
reaction to Professor X's death is solid. The
yeah,
way he's like mournful of his old friend, because they were frenemies, I guess. They were nemesises in their ideals, but they were true friends. And I'm really glad we get to see that relationship more fleshed out in later movies. But Magneto doesn't want Professor X dead.
no,
He doesn't.
no,
Professor X doesn't want Magneto dead. They just want to do what they consider to be the right thing.
yeah, it's just Magneto's ideology and the way he wants to go about like doing such thing is the big problem that they always face. Um, I think he just wants more of a fascist sort of society, whereas Xavier just wants to be sort of accepted into the fold with everyone else.
Yep.
But yeah, what do you think about that? My love of that whole sequence. I can see people being like, Ellis, what the hell are you on about, bud? That is
No, I can see it. I didn't particularly feel the same way. To me, I was like, oh, Professor X is out again. He won't be making an appearance in the final act of this movie again, because they do that every time. Oftentimes Mystique is fucking around with Cerebro. She does that more than once in this franchise. It's kind of her thing. But in this case, he's officially offed and then swiftly brought back. But yeah, there's a lot going on in this movie, a lot to talk about. I do want to switch gears and say that I almost like what they did with the danger room at the beginning.
oh my god, the misdirect, mate. Jesus Christ. Go on, yeah.
I
Take it away.
almost
Take
like
it
it
away.
because they're in a scenario where they're at war in the beginning of this movie, and those fuckers use this in the trailer as if this was going to be a major part of the movie. The sneaky goddamn bastards. But they're fighting a sentinel that you don't see, and that's the problem, right? They're just like kind of getting projectiles thrown at them, and the X-Men are hiding behind debris, and eventually Wolverine gets thrown into something you don't see, and a sentinel head rolls down. I need to see that happen. You can't do that off screen. Not if you're not going to have the sentinels come back, because that sentinel head looks pretty fucking sweet. Like
How
that
good
would have
does it
been
look?
badass.
Mate, that was the biggest cock tease of the entire franchise. Like
Oh yeah.
that scene, right? For as quick as what it is, it's snappy, it's got quick dialogue, it's quite fun, it's energetic, and yeah, you're right. As soon as he goes into the light and he comes back down with the head, the scale of the head, the look of the head, like I was like, that's a sentinel. I want to see the rest of that body, like 100%.
Yes.
And at the start of that whole sequence, it even like pretty much lies to you, like it goes somewhere in the near future. So like it's a total misdirect, that whole sequence. Like, yeah, I love the fact that they incorporated something in the Danger Room. That was always like a big part of my X-Men childhood of like if you ever played like X-Men Legends and stuff, like that was it was where you did your fighting, like in the Danger Room. Do you know what I mean? It was
Hell
like
yeah.
I always remember that. It was so that was cool, but like because it's wrapped up in this giant cock tease is like horrific, and it makes it even more horrific because like spoiler, but like I can't stand the Sentinels in Days of Future Past.
Mm.
Um, because they're such a big part of X-Men lore and like especially like animated series and stuff like that, they've got such a unique look to them that like I should be saying this in Days of Future Past. But yeah, I'll just leave it as yeah. I love that scene too. Best scene probably in the whole movie until it's not.
Yeah, I can't believe they put that in the trailer. It's just like they made it seem like they were going to be the X-Men this time. And I'm gonna hold off on the end until we get to the end of this particular movie because there's a few things I want to say. So I'm gonna talk a lot of shit about this movie. But like I said, every X-Men movie has something great. To me, what's great in this movie is Beast.
Oh snap, mate! I've got that written down. Big underline. What Kelsey Grammer? Is it Kelsey Grammer?
Yeah,
Holy shit, mate! Take it away, beast.
that is Beast right there. They found the right actor, they got the perfect makeup, and they made 90s animated series Beast perfection.
Yep.
It's amazing how like diplomatic, well-spoken, intelligent he is. He's in politics, but then we find out he was also at Xavier's school for a time.
Yeah.
And he ends up suiting up with the X-Men. And when we finally get to see this guy in action, he's beast mode. I love seeing Beast go beast mode. He doesn't do it very often, but when he does, it's fucking epic. It's always like he's understated because he doesn't fight a lot. You know, Beast, he's more diplomatic. He's a scientist. He's often a doctor. He's always kind of repairing the people that are injured. But when he does fight, he's something else and you forget about it.
Yeah, 100%. He's absolutely amazing in the film. All his interactions with Wolverine, so sick. Love it. So funny. Um, yeah, I think it's a bit of a shame. Like in the later iterations of Beast, played by Nicholas Hoult, like you do get the more scientific side of Beast. Like you see that side of him come through, but loses a little bit of the personality, in my opinion. Kelsey Grammer, that's a choice. Like that is someone's decision that they made, and I think it's like pretty wild. I don't think it'd be the first person who I'd think of for that role.
Yeah. But it works, man. It works so well. It's like it's one of those things where it's like I would have never thought of that either.
No.
But the fact that they got him and they cast him and they got the makeup right, it adds much needed to this movie. Because you know, each movie kind of brings in new characters, and Beast is an OG X-Men. He's one of the original X-Men. So you got to have him at some point. And this is just a fantastic version of Beast. I love him so much. That being said, there's other characters they introduced that have nothing to do in this movie. And you know I'm talking about Angel, Warren Worthington III.
Oh.
Nothing to do in this movie.
And that was another misdirect because he was so heavily promoted prior to the film coming out. Like he was everywhere on all the promotional art. And you know, the other thing that I remember is that they had a bunch of shots of Angel played by the fantastic Ben Foster. They had
great actor.
Great actor, great actor. Maybe we didn't fully know the full extent of how good he was at that time, but my God, he had a great career. I still don't think enough people know who Ben Foster is. right now. I think more people need to know who he is. Just a little side tangent. He's really good in a film called Hostage with Bruce Willis. If he plays really intimidating. Sidetrack though.
Let's not forget about the one with Chris Pine, the like modern Western.
Oh yeah, Hell or High Water.
Hell
Amazing
or
film.
High Water.
Unbelievable film. Amazing. But yeah, before the film coming out, they had a bunch of images of Angel full decked out in the black leather costume, and you're like, "Oh, sick! Yeah, there's gonna be some sick X-Men action going on." No,
Not only does he not wear the costume, he doesn't wear a shirt.
yeah, fuck that, mate. I don't know, man. It's not good at all. Not good at all. I think his best scene is like his one scene where he changes his mind on the cure, he jumps out the window, and that's pretty much all you get of Angel for the entire film.
Yeah. It yeah, he's got nothing to do in the movie. There's weird choices in this movie. Multiple Man has nothing to do in this movie.
Nope.
He's used for one scene. He has such a cool power. Multiple Man, right? So for those that don't know, he's a mutant and his ability is that he can create multiple versions of himself. He can send out one version of himself to go do anything, to learn anything. And when he brings it back into himself, he now has the accumulated knowledge of himself and the multiple versions of himself. I think there should be a Multiple Man series because there's so much interesting shit you can do with that. And the multiples of him can die and the original will still live. And the comics are constantly misdirecting people on was this the original or not? It never is. He's just super cool. And he is a decoy in this movie for one scene. And that's it. It's like, okay, well, that was all we got of him. Why do we have him? Just for that. It doesn't work at all.
Yeah, there's a couple of characters in this film that really get like their limelight for like 45 seconds of like one scene, and that's sort of it for the entire film. But yeah, who else have we got? Like, there's another love triangle situation in this film. Really don't appreciate it for whatever reason. It's with Bobby, Iceman, Kitty Pryde, played by
And Pyro
Page, and Pyro and Rogue. Like, yeah, this nightmare. It's because Rogue's getting jealous because
oh yeah, that's right.
it's like, and they go, I don't know, mate.
Yeah, because this movie introduces the cure, which is the scientific mechanism that has been developed to remove the mutant genes or remove the mutant gene itself, so they don't have their mutant powers. So they can become a normal person. And I can see why Rogue would want that. I definitely get that in terms of the story, but her wanting to go do that really has no impact on the story.
No.
So I don't really care. Bobby kind of being close with Kitty Pryde, again, I don't really care. Like, it's just they're trying to find ways to make the cure impact characters in their own way. And I get it, but I don't care.
Yeah. I think it's a bit of a shame because, like, obviously Rogue's been a little bit of a focal point the last two films, and like she sort of has something to do for like the first 25 minutes of this film. Then once the cure comes out, she's pretty much backseat for the rest of the film, which is fine, I suppose. It's just doesn't really go anywhere, like you were saying.
They do imply that she does get the cure, but in a later movie, it seems that she actually didn't. So if you're going to kind of do the mental gymnastics on this one, the best I could come up with is that she decided to go get the cure, changed her mind, and in coming to terms with keeping this ability, now has better control over her powers because she definitely touches Bobby at the end and it doesn't kill him. So
yeah,
we're led to believe she got the cure. But later on, that's kind of like retroactively taken away, which we'll talk about later for sure.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. But yeah,
Juggernaut, bitch. Talk about him.
Oh, our boy Vinny Jones.
Bullet Tooth Tony.
Jesus hell. He should have stayed to these British gangster flicks because, oh my God, this is horrific. This is horrific. Is this supposed to be the implied brother of Charles Xavier in the comics? I don't think so.
Fuck with my helmet, Charles. Yeah. All right, I got to talk about this.
There's a
old as fuck video that predates this movie called I'm the Juggernaut Bitch, which I used to think was just like the funniest thing I'd ever seen. They took a bunch of Juggernaut clips from the animated series and they dubbed over them, and they're very inappropriate. And his catchphrase is "I'm the Juggernaut Bitch," and it was so popular on the internet, I guess, that Bryan Singer thought it would be a good idea to or Brett Ratner, actually, in this case, Brent Ratner thought it would be a good idea to introduce that line into the movie, where when he's chasing down Kitty Pryde, he says, "Don't you know who I am? I'm the Juggernaut, bitch." Now, a lot of people, they hear that and they're just like, stupid action movie line, right? But to me, I'm like, that's from the fucking video. Those motherfuckers watched the I Am the Juggernaut Bitch video.
They were on
Did
it,
you end
mate.
up watching that?
Yeah, amazing. I can't believe it predates the movie though, to be fair. But yeah, awesome. Um,
But what do you think
Vinny,
about the way the Juggernaut looks? Because it's a whole different look.
it's definitely a choice. Like, I like the rubber abs that they put on Vinny Jones. Like, that's definitely a choice. The helmet, I don't like the helmet. It's not like the classic Juggernaut helmet that I know. I think they've definitely nailed Juggernaut for me in the Deadpool 2. I really like that take on Juggernaut in that
Yeah,
movie. Even though it's
that's much better.
all CGI, I think, if you're gonna have a character like Juggernaut, it's gonna be CGI. It's gonna
He's
be
like the
CGI.
Hulk,
Yeah.
right? You can't just do Lou Ferrigno. Like, it doesn't look right. You
No.
have to have a big CGI character.
And they
And
really sorry, go on.
maybe they didn't have the technology for it here, but it looks silly. It reminds me of Bane in Batman and Robin. Just like this big inflatable thing that like you poke him with a pin and he just like deflates and flies away.
Yeah. And I think they definitely didn't learn anything from that going into Apocalypse either. But we'll get on to that one later on. But yeah, Corey, you've got some things to say about the ending of this film.
So this is as close as we get in this first trilogy to that they're officially the X-Men.
Yeah.
To the point where Wolverine says it.
That lineup's sick, where they're all stood in that formation line and they're like holding the fort together. I do like that shot. And it's like the last you can see Colossus at the end, who gets shafted in this film and the previous film too. I remember seeing Colossus in X-Men 2 for that one 0.5 second clip of him where he turns into metal and you're like, wow, my God, yeah.
Oh, that was amazing. Yeah, that was a fanfare moment for sure.
100%. Then it just never comes back. He comes in this film for a little bit, but nothing big. He should have had a bigger relationship with Kitty Pryde, I think, which they sort of just fumbled. But
yeah, absolutely. The lead up though to the X-Men lineup against the group of unnamed mutants led by Magneto and Phoenix. The lead up to that, the president is like kind of overseeing this. He's sending in military forces. They're all falling on their face. And he goes, "Thank God help us." That is like such a cringe moment. Like every time I hear that, it's like the delivery and the actor that played the president. He's like this like 90-year-old guy. He's like Joe Biden. He's like, then God help us, Jimmy. It's like this old fucking fogey. But anyway, the X-Men being lined up right there, that's cool. The problem is that the people they're fighting are just guys that all have jump powers.
true. Very true. Very true.
The enemies, the random mutants that Magneto teamed up with here, they're just all guys on wires. There's a couple of them that have unique powers, like the guy that can shoot like lava or whatever, and that's kind of cool. But too many of them are just Toad. They're all Toads. He just found all the Toads.
Yeah. Yeah, you are right. That is one thing. I never picked up on it when I watched the movie back in the day, but it's something with subsequent viewings now. It's something I pick up on. Yeah, man. They're all a bunch of Spider-Man jumping off the bridge. Yeah,
way too much wire work, dude.
Very true.
The wire work thing, when you overuse it in a movie, it looks awful. Batman and Robin, way too much wire work. Same thing with the final act of this movie. Not to say that there are some cool moments, right? Beast, when he goes beast mode, is a fucking sight to behold. And it's like, yes, we finally get to see that. Wolverine is still cool, although I think his moment in the woods outshines his moment here because there's just a little bit more brutality
100%.
and more running. You know, when Wolverine is running at people, when he can like go full speed and like dive at people with his claws, it feels more kinetic. It feels more like Wolverine rather than him and the guys like holding a line. Where when he's stationary fighting someone, it's just not as good. But you know, he got a good moment early on. Storm and Callisto, it's whatever. I don't care too much about it. I think the thing that bothers me the most about this is Iceman versus Pyro, because it's kind of been built up that they're gonna fight the whole movie.
Yeah.
And how do they fight? They both shoot beams at each other. That shot is right. It's two people in a frame and they're just shooting the beams at each other. And it's like, which one's gonna win? That's not good enough. You have to do more than that.
It's a number of situations like that. Harry Potter, Voldemort, Iron Man, Captain America. The list could go on. Two different colored powers going in at each other. That's it. That's all we need to do, guys. The effects guys.
But that's the entirety of their fight. So as opposed to like Captain America, Iron Man, or any other example, there's usually more. That's usually like how it starts or how it ends. In this, that's the entirety.
I will say I did appreciate when I was younger when that scene is happening and then Iceman goes full Iceman. It was like to me it was like, oh, has he unlocked his like next sort of evolution? It's the next stage because
yes, okay,
my
that is cool. Yeah,
my Iceman figure upstairs, he's completely Iceman. Do you know what I mean? Like he's just.
I think I got Bobby right here.
Yeah, mate, this is it. I thought that was really cool, but like you say, it ends too quickly. It starts and it finishes, and that's that gun that's been built up the last two movies.
Yeah. And you know, defeating Magneto is very abrupt.
Yes.
And it's like whatever. He's not the principal villain of this movie, which is good and bad, right? Because it's really all about Jean, the Phoenix, who I think it's hard to adapt that cinematically, her power. I think Screen Junkies in the Honest Trailers video made fun of it most accurately. Says she has the power to intensely stare at people. And that is what she does.
Yeah.
She intensely
100%.
stares.
If you were going to pick one, which Phoenix saga does it better? Which Phoenix movie does it better? This one or Dark Phoenix?
I don't know. To me, they're like a carbon copy in terms of like inadequacy and like letdown. I don't know, man. Why do you have a preference?
I prefer this one, definitely,
Okay.
100%. But I just think it's because I've got more of an emotional connection towards. Is it Famika? Famika? What
Famke Janssen.
Yeah, I've got more of a connection to her and Hugh Jackman. Just like that overall ending scene of him like killing Jean Grey, quite emotional. I dig it. There's some emotion
True.
there. There's some emotion there.
I feel his pain, you know?
Works for me. Yeah, 100%. And I think it's just it looks good and it's believable because Hugh Jackman's pretty good in the scene. Like he's like crying and like he sees like adamantium skeleton and stuff like that. It's
great emotional actor. He can convey so much emotion and you feel it.
Yeah.
And you know, the sadness he feels during that, you can't help but feel bad for the guy. You know, I do like he's the only one that can stop her, and he's right. She's disintegrating everyone around them, and he's the one that has to be the one to end it. And he's the only one that could, you know? You couldn't expect Beast to go in there and kill her. He wouldn't do it. Or Kitty or anyone else. Like, it has to be him because he can deal with the pain that comes along with having to make that sacrifice.
100%, man. 100%. And that sort of brings us to the end of the first three X-Men movies.
Can I give a couple final thoughts on this one?
Oh, yeah, go for it, mate. Sorry. Yeah.
You know, I know Cyclops isn't very heavily involved in this movie. You know, he's in the beginning and Jean takes him out. But I do really like a line that he says to Wolverine. It's something that's like stuck with me my whole life and like has maybe a deeper meaning that it's intended to have. He says, "Not everyone heals as fast as you, Logan." I love that.
Yeah.
Like what Jean's death did to him, it's ruined his life. Like what he's saying is, I will never recover from this. You know, Wolverine's kind of like, you know, she's gone. We have to move on. And he's like, no, I will not move on because Jean was everything to me and I've lost everything. And there is no coming back from that. That's a good moment, I think. Good line, small thing, might be a little bit personal to me, but I like it. Something I have to talk about is when Magneto recruits new mutants for his cause, right? So he goes to like this mutant gathering.
Are we calling this the Brotherhood? Is this really like the first glimpse at what the Brotherhood really is?
Yeah, I guess it's his new brotherhood. I think he calls his group the Brotherhood in the first movie, or Charles
Does he?
calls it the Brotherhood.
Right, cool. Right, right.
But he recruits people, you know, and all the mutants there that are like mutant and proud types have tattoos that tell people that they're mutants. And, you know, they say to you, where's your mark? Like, basically, why don't you have a tattoo? And I talked about this earlier, but he shows the tattoo he got during the Holocaust. And he says, I've been marked once and no needle will ever touch my skin again. I love that.
Yeah.
But there's a character in here that I fucking hate. I hate him, but he's also hilarious. And that's the porcupine bitch.
Spike.
That's what I call him.
Yeah, this guy is no good. But you know who I thought it was maybe trying to be?
He's
Like,
no good.
did you ever watch, obviously there was the animated season in the 90s, amazing, but there was actually a really good animated season, Evolution, X-Men Evolution. It was more based on like the Ultimate Comics, but I'm sure Spike was like a big deal in that lineup, and there was a similar mutant with similar powers that just had like spikes come out of him.
I had to look this guy up. He's actually called Quill.
Quill.
So
right,
he's
okay.
a different guy.
Right.
You know who I thought might be close to Spike is the guy that Wolverine fights in the woods that he fucking kills.
Yeah, I was just hoping it wasn't going to be him. But yeah,
right.
Yeah, you are right though. Yeah.
But this porcupine motherfucker, dude. First of all, he's Juntao's little bitch from Rush Hour.
Yeah, yeah.
But secondly, he has one move that he can do, and he does it in this movie. It's like, okay, he can make himself spiky. What's his use in a scenario where he needs to take someone out? He can hug you to death. That's his move. He does it to someone in this movie. He does it to a scientist. He says, come here, everything's going to be okay.
Oh,
and he hugs her. And then he lets the spikes out and it kills her. That's the only thing he's got. I feel like if you give me a baseball bat, I could fuck this guy up. Like,
he's got to get close to you. There's no like sort of he can't get you from way back. He's got to get close to you. So you just have something on you, a bat, a small item, small blade of any sort,
a knuckle duster. Like
take this guy out.
Yeah, I think it's so dumb that he basically has to hug someone to kill them, because I don't know of another scenario where he's a formidable opponent, at least to another mutant.
It's sort of, you've just like rung a bell there, because obviously, yeah, he was in Rush Hour, which was also directed by Brett Ratner.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not a fan of Brett Ratner's movies, I guess.
No. You're not a fan of Rush Hour at all, are you?
No. Hell no.
Right, mate. Last Stand. Overall, not the best one out of three, but there is some elements in it that I really appreciate. Like I said, the house scene with Jean Grey, really love that sequence. Really like the new sort of elevated score that they have. But there's a lot of shit in this one as well. Just out of curiosity, we've done three here. Which one would you say is your favorite out of these first three?
2, easily.
Yeah, gotta be X2, man. Gotta be. Mate, it is 2009.
It is?
It's 2009 right now.
Holy shit. I'm going to invest in Bitcoin. Give me a minute.
Mate, it's 2009. I don't know if you've been on your computer recently, today or yesterday, but there's been a little movie leaked online.
Oh my God, the leak.
Nice. This, right. So, yes, ladies and gentlemen.
Someone went to prison for leaking this movie.
Yeah, someone's done hard jail time.
Seriously, that's crazy.
Like, if you were going to leak a movie, and go to jail for the rest of your life, it's got to be X-Men Origins.
Wolverine. I don't think he went for the rest of his life, but I think he got a couple years out of this. Mate. Did you watch the Mr. Sunday movies video about this movie's leak?
I will have done. I've listened to most of their content, but yeah, go on. I remember it happening. Like I remember this happening. I remember.
Oh yeah.
I watched the leak. Like, I'm not gonna lie. It really weird. Like, I say what you need to say about Sunday movies, because I've this is a little bit of a weird one for me.
Well, so there was someone that was arrested for it. I'll give like kind of the brief overview of that. Mr. Sunday Movies really goes into detail about how that person got it and like what the response was to the leak and things like that. Obviously, it hurt this movie a lot because it was very, very hyped. This movie, extremely. It's like, okay, this is going to be the movie that everyone wants.
Yeah.
This is going to be it. And it comes down to Rupert Murdoch, who is the head of Fox.
Mm-hmm.
It's his fault that this movie was leaked, basically. He wanted to see it early, and he forced the team that was making this movie to create an early print specifically for him. And they didn't want to. They were like, well, we don't really do that. It causes leaks, and it's not really the way the movie's intended to be seen. But he's the head of Fox, and he's like, no, give it to me by tomorrow. In the process of creating that particular test version or whatever you want to call it for him, it got leaked. It got in the hands of some guy who bought it. You know, when they used to sell like bootleg DVDs on the street? I don't know if they did that in England, but they definitely did it in LA.
Oh, they did. My brother used to sell them.
Okay, your brother.
I've just incriminated my brother there. Don't go after me.
Well, this guy got a hold of one of those, and it was the Wolverine, and it was this particular leak. This guy uploaded it online and then removed it, but it was too late. It was everywhere. It got traced back to him. So it wasn't even really that he was involved in the studio. He got it from some street guy, but there was one person that basically started the distribution of this movie online illegally, and he's the one that got time for this.
Right. So anyone watching this right now or listening is like, what did the leak look like? Basically,
about the same.
About as shit as what the film ended up being. But like a lot of the scenes towards the end fight with quote unquote Deadpool was like all the effects weren't finished yet. So there was a lot of just like people fighting on white blocks and blue blocks and stuff like that. But did you watch the leak?
I watched the leak after I saw the movie.
But I did not. I watched that leak straight up. I'm not even gonna lie. I did watch the movie in cinemas, but it was more of like I knew after that leak, yeah, this was going to be a failure. Like I think you could tell that from there was going to be nothing added to the film to make that any better. And my thing is like, do you think by this film leaking, it sort of slowed production down on people actually finishing the effects and stuff like that? Because I don't know about you, mate, but this film has got some of the worst CGI effects I've ever seen. And
I cannot believe how bad Wolverine's claws look. They look like they came out of fucking Toontown from Who Framed Roger Rabbit. When you first see him looking at his adamantium claws in the bathroom in that old farm, they look the same as the leak, I imagine. Yeah. They look completely ridiculous. They are not there. He's looking at something that's not there, which is a huge departure from the way they added his claws in all the other movies as a practical effect. Or maybe they were CGI sometimes, but they looked fucking real. I know in a lot of cases he did have something really on his hands, but wow. I think the most egregious example of bad CGI in this movie, maybe even the whole X-Men franchise, is the first introduction of Wolverine's adamantium claws.
It's one of the worst shots like I've seen put to a film, and it doesn't really get any better, if I'm being honest. Like the whole sequence with him like attacking the helicopter mid-air on a motorcycle, like there's just a lot of really bad shit in this movie. And like Corey, you were saying, like we were obviously really hyped for this movie because there was a lot of like, you know, if you were a fan of the X-Men, the first three films gave you like a core bunch of X-Men. We didn't really deviate much from either side, but we got into some like nitty-gritty characters in this one. So it was like, oh, we're getting some, you know, we're getting like the Blob, getting Deadpool and stuff like that. What that's going to be really cool. My God, we're going to have like a really cool suit. Like, you know, like there was just a lot of hype. There was a lot of hype, and even
The
like
Blob.
images
Yeah.
of like Emma Frost and stuff like that, but it was like a younger version of Emma Frost. I don't know.
Yeah, that was like trailer stuff. It's like in the trailer, you see the
Yeah.
Blob, you see Deadpool, you see Emma Frost, you see that move where she like goes in front of the bullets and is like that, and she turns into Diamond, and you see Cyclops behind her. It's like, oh, okay, there's gonna be some cool shit in this movie.
And Taylor Kitsch's Gambit, I was just like, yeah, this is gonna be cool.
Oh, dude, I was so excited for this fucking movie. I was like, it's gonna be like Wolverine and Gambit, they brawl, and then they're fucking buddies, and they go on an adventure, and they gotta fuck with Sabretooth. I was like, oh yeah, dude.
And
We
if that,
finally get Gambit. Gambit was a fan favorite that has been missing from these movies for too long. Everyone
still,
was like, we need Gambit.
it's still a leaf
Still,
that
yeah.
hasn't been like that's untouched. Like there is a lot of cool characters out there that haven't been touched that we've got. I imagine will be getting done justice in like the next five years or whatever. But yeah, this movie, man, Gambit especially, like that was a real heartbreaker. I really like the scene that he's in for the 5 minutes he's in it, and then they just have him turn up at the end to just sort of save the day with a helicopter or what. Wait, I think it's Gambit at the end. I think he's with.
It is.
But yeah, I really like Taylor Kitsch as well. I think he got done dirty on a lot of projects. Like,
I think it could have worked. Like when you first see him at the card table, it's kind of cool, and it's kind of like there's tension.
It is
He says,
cool.
"I know who you are, Gambit," and it's like, "Oh shit!" And then it's like, "How is he going to do the card thing?" And I like the way he does the card thing when they like levitate out of his hand, right? So he like holds his hand up and they like shoot forward like projectile. I think that's pretty cool. After that, it's all wire work. He's just a wire guy. He's just like out there jumping around in the alley, swinging his stick around, and he's not doing enough like Gambit maneuvers. I expected him to kind of be like flinging things at Wolverine, like, be kind of like agile. He'd do like a somersault. He'd come up, he'd hit him with the staff, and then he'd like fling a card at him. It was just mostly him jumping around.
Yeah.
Mostly jumping. That's when they don't know what to do with the mutant. Just have him jump a lot, put him on wires,
Yeah. And we've got to sort of dive into this one a little bit. What the hell happened with Deadpool? Like who was the decision? Like, the decision was made. We're going to have Deadpool in the film, but he's going to look nothing like Deadpool. And we're going to
change his powers.
Sew his mouth up as well. Hang on. Is this guy called Merc with a Mouth? Yeah, but it's fine. It's fine. No one knows who this character is.
It's not fine, god damn it. It's a fucking disgrace.
Everyone knew who this character was because he's so fucking cool, like visually. So it's like even like partial knowledge of some of these comics and stuff, like Deadpool will crop up and you will want to know who that is. He's quite an interesting visually looking character. And to have Ryan Reynolds play him in this movie, like it is sort of like this is going to be great. How wrong were we? But I suppose if this wasn't this bad, we wouldn't have got Deadpool later on down the line. So
maybe. I mean, can't they just both exist and be good though? Like,
yeah, true.
So, we get Deadpool, and I think he comes off pretty good as Deadpool, and when he's talking, he's kind of like a wise ass, and I like aspects of him, and then we see his big scene where he showcases his powers, and I'm like, what is this, like super fast guy Deadpool now? All right, I guess that's fine. They changed some things up in the comics. We'll get to see him do something cool later, and then it's just like a transformed version of him that's not him at all. And the biggest problem with the reason I call it a disgrace is because this is the first introduction of Deadpool cinematically, and they just did so much of it wrong.
Yeah,
and it's easy for them to do that and for it to kill the character, like with Gambit. Yeah. Fortunately, Deadpool lives on in superior movies than this one, but 100%. Bad inclusion of him. I mean, I think there's a lot of problems with this movie outside of Deadpool. I know a lot of people really hone in on the Deadpool thing, but rewatching it again, I realize this movie is kind of fun in a way that the previous movies aren't, because it's the story is structured differently. And of course it is, because it's focused on a centralized character. I don't think the story is particularly good, but it's fun in a way that the other movies aren't.
Yeah.
So it does have some watchability. You can kind of put this on and kind of go along for the ride, but they do get a lot wrong.
Yeah.
I have said this before. Every X-Men movie has something that's great. What I think is great about this movie, opening credits scene.
Awesome. So good.
I love the opening credits scene with Wolverine and Sabretooth, right? Victor Creed and then James Howlett going through time, growing up together, fighting in wars. Cinematically, it's beautiful.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the whole take on Sabretooth in this one, played by Liev Schreiber, I think it is.
Yeah.
Decent. I really like it. I think he's pretty intimidating throughout the whole thing, to be honest. But yeah, ultimately, this film, like you say, it's all right to have on in the background now and then, I suppose. I can get a couple of things out of it, but ultimately, this one is not for me. Not for me.
No, I mean, there's just weird character choices. The Blob, right? A mainstay villain, at least in the 90s. He was around all the time. The Blob and Toad were just like fodder villains that like showed up and got their asses kicked. The Blob, though, sometimes could kick some ass of his own. Though what he was not was a guy with an eating disorder.
No.
And what is his power before he has an eating disorder in this movie? He can stop tank bullets. He's just invulnerable, I guess. So like what is his practical use? And then there's a guy called what? Agent Zero? Is that his name?
What is his power? That's what I want to know.
He has wirework power and he's really good with a gun. He's John Wick. That's his power.
Yeah, good shout.
So I don't know what they're doing with Agent Zero. I don't know what they're doing with a lot of people in this movie. There's a guy that has a pretty cool power called Wraith, and he's played by the Black Eyed Peas. He can teleport, which is awesome. But there's a moment where he does like the dumbest thing imaginable and tries to beat Sabretooth with fists.
Ah, yeah.
So he sees Sabretooth. Sabretooth killed the Blob, I guess, off screen. So, Wraith is like, all right, now I'm going to have to kill you. And he does it by just trying to like punch him, teleporting around him and punching him. That's not going to work.
Interesting tactic to take.
So, of course, he gets killed. There's some very less than smart decisions made in this movie, both within the script and with the production of it. Because when it's good, it's like, all right, this is okay. Like seeing some of the, like the thing I mentioned earlier, the opening credits scene, like they took a lot of care to make that as cinematic as possible. And then they took no care for other things like Wolverine's claws. Like, let's just do it the cheapest and easiest possible way.
Yeah, it's it just seems cheap overall. I think it seems like we're 4 movies in, and like they're obviously really excited about getting a solo Wolverine adventure out there. You would have thought it'd have. I don't know. I just think it looks shoddy. The film looks terrible, especially near the end of the film. Like the effects work and stuff. Like it sort of doesn't. I can't crawl back from how bad some of the effects are in here, which makes it really hard for me to watch. But the thing is, as well, I've got to give this movie a little bit of credit because this is basically where my online fandom sort of started. So prior to 2009, I was not online looking for movie news as such. But when this leak happened, and I ended up seeing the movie before it'd come out and whatnot. It gave me the push to start going online and start researching different films and whatnot. That's where my sort of online fandom came from. So I've got this movie to thank for that, really.
I remember this movie came out after Iron Man. And I remember Iron Man feeling like a placeholder movie for me, which looking back, it was definitely a superior movie. But I remember watching Iron Man and being like, yeah, that was pretty good. But man, not the Wolverine, X-Men Origins Wolverine is going to be the shit.
Yeah.
That's going to be the next major superhero movie. That's awesome. And I just hate being disappointed by X-Men movies. It happens all too often, man.
Absolutely.
This is one of the few that doesn't give the promise of, they're going to be the X-Men next time exactly. Although I guess we do kind of see somewhat of that with Professor X and how he acquired that group of students. Another weird de-aged Professor X, right?
Yeah, totally. I think it's quite interesting that I do remember before this film came out officially that there was talks because obviously this film is titled X-Men Oranges, Origin. Oh my god, I'm saying oranges.
Origins.
Origins. That's right. Colon Wolverine. They had plans to do a Magneto X-Men Origins as well, which they were going to follow up if this movie did well. Now, I think a lot of the ideas for that Magneto solo movie ended up going to our next movie, which is maybe my favorite X-Men film. Maybe.
They definitely used some of those ideas in X-Men First Class. They had to have. And
100%.
the idea was not just Magneto, but I remember they wanted, I don't know for sure, but I heard discussion that they wanted to do multiple X-Men Origins movies. So, of course, they're going to start with the most interesting, most famous character, Wolverine. And then Magneto was going to be next. I think the problem with that is like, who do you do next? You're not going to do X-Men Origins Cyclops. You're not going to do Storm. Who's a good character to do? And I think of the most interesting, those are really the two. So I'm kind of glad they didn't do a bunch of X-Men Origins movies.
Absolutely. I think that would have been a bad idea. And to be honest, I always thought, even back then, it was a weird one going straight to Magneto after that. Like, even though he has got a really interesting backstory and one that, like, can really open up to some, like, good storytelling and some good sequences, like we're going to get to in this next film. But yeah, X-Men Origins, then to have Magneto there, it's X-Men's a team. Do you know what I mean? It's not Magneto technically isn't an X-Men. Like that's like so that was a bit of a weird one for me to begin with anyway. But anyway, it takes us to X-Men First Class in 2011. Directed by Matthew Vaughn, this one, who if you're familiar with Matthew Vaughn, he's a pretty sick director to be honest.
What is he famous for? Kingsman?
Yeah, he did Kingsman, which I really enjoy the first one. He did the first Kick-Ass movie, which was really good. And
Oh yeah.
a
Yeah.
British gangster film, Layer Cake, starring Daniel Craig from about 2004, I think.
That's right.
He's a really good director. I had him pegged for Superman for the longest of times. I thought he would have been a great choice for that, to be honest. I think he had some interest in doing that as well. But yeah, X-Men First Class, mate. What can you remember any hype for this one? Because as far as I'm concerned, there wasn't much hype surrounding this one, just because of the two last X-Men movies that we had being so subpar, I think, for the majority of people.
I saw the trailer for this and I was like, this movie's gonna suck ass. This movie's not gonna be good. Last one wasn't good. I've been disappointed. I've been hurt before. There's no way this movie's gonna be good. But it was promoted heavily. It was all over MySpace. So Facebook does this sometimes too, I think. But MySpace used to do it a lot, where you go to log in and like the whole overlay was based on the movie that was being promoted. They also did that for The Dark Knight. But yeah, this movie was being promoted all over the place. I remember seeing trailers for it everywhere. And I didn't think much of it. I was like, I'll probably see it, sure. But I don't think this is going to be good. So it wasn't like an opening nighter for me.
No,
like
neither.
X-Men Origins Wolverine was, or like The Last Stand was. I had kind of been like, all right, you're fucking with me too much now. And I just didn't think it looked good.
No, I wasn't on the hype train for this one at all, to be honest. And like you, I saw this like at a later date. I saw it in the cinema, but it wasn't like a open weekend anything. And if I'm going to be totally honest, I don't think I fully appreciated this film even after I saw it. I think it's been later on in my life going back to these films is that I really appreciate this one. And I think it stands out now more than what it did to me back then, if that makes any sense.
I love it now. I loved it then.
Yeah,
I was so happy with this movie. I was like, yes. For me, I need to be able to like show this movie to my girlfriend. At least that was my mentality at the time. It's like if I can do that, I know it's good. And this was a movie that I would have shown to many girlfriends in my life. I was like, well, you need to watch this X-Men movie. This one's sick.
Many.
I'm married now, by the way. Sorry, ladies. But yeah, this movie, I think it has so many good things going for it. Because this is a younger Professor X. He's like 24 or something. He still has hair, right? The X-Men have not been formed yet. This is the story about how he meets Magneto and how the X-Men get formed. And that might sound appealing. It might not. It doesn't really matter. The way they tell the story is amazing. And I think the best part of the way they tell the story is Magneto, Nazi hunter.
That's what that Solo movie was going to be, man.
Yes.
You know it. Yeah. How good is Fassbender in this movie?
He's perfect. He's fucking perfection. I mean, him and James McAvoy are both really good, but I love Fassbender. He's truly incredible. He's such a great Magneto. He can be so villainous, so imposing, just his stare will cut you to pieces. But I love the fact that, it recaps the intro scene of X-Men 1 and the intro scene of this one. This was a kid that was in the Holocaust, but it shows us what happens after he kind of is taken away by the Nazi guards. He's taken to like the lead Nazi, Kevin Bacon, who's our principal villain of this movie.
Kevin Bacon.
Yeah. And, he kind of helps Magneto develop his power. But Magneto as an adult, Eric Lencher, he is on a quest to find this guy and kill him and to kill any fucking Nazi motherfuckers that are in his way along the path. And I love that. When he goes to South America and he's in that bar scene, that's one of my favorite scenes ever in an X-Men movie. The tension in that scene, when he speaks German and they're like, where are you from? And he's like, I'm from here. He's like, okay, I knew people from there. What are your parents' names? Oh, they don't have names. Their names were taken away from them by tailors and pig farmers, and they all take a sip. They set it down, and then he has that knife, and he uses the magnetism to throw the knife and then bring it back to his hand. Such a good effect, by the way. But just like this guy is out for blood, and you kind of are on his side about it. It's like, yeah, go, okay, kill him.
Yeah, it's really intense, that scene. Really good sequence in the bar. I like the other guy. He held up three fingers, or is it three fingers or three? Oh no, wrong film. Sorry, different German Nazi film. But yeah, no, really good scene. Really good scene. This is like Magneto out for full vengeance in this film, and it's so good. It's so like untamed at the start, and you believe it because Fassbender's a fucking great actor, man. Like I think it just speaks volumes to how good Fassbender and James McAvoy are because they follow two really good actors like Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart are no slouches, man. So
Absolutely
to follow that, and like you said, because they go so young with it, they get away with not having fully the mannerisms of Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen. That was a bone of contention for me, definitely, when this film was coming out. I was just like, well, these guys look nothing like them, which I know shouldn't matter, anything like that. And they sort of like wipe that straight out of my head, like with this film, because of how good the performances are. Like, I want to give like a shout out to one scene, and it's another favorite scene in the entire franchise, I think. And it's when Magneto and Professor X, they're outside the school. They've just acquired the school and they're in training. And Magneto,
oh my god,
yeah, and Magneto's like, like shoot me, try and shoot me in the head, and like Professor X can't do it. He can't bring himself to do it. So they try move the giant satellite, and it's just a really, really good scene in like when you get like it's almost become a meme when people talk about X-Men films, especially when it came to Dark Phoenix, of like just a lot of hand movements. Like it's almost become a bit of a joke. But in that scene, just with Fassbender and like all that emotion coming out of his face, it's a lot like it's similar scene to another film that me and you sort of enjoy of Batman and Robin when he gets that bike cut off and he screams in anger on the edge of that little finger. And it's similar to that. It's just like pure emotion in Fassbender's face coming out, and it's like he's crying, he's like tearing up and stuff. It's like it's just powerful. It's a powerful moment in the film.
Everything in that scene works. I know I said this about something earlier, but it's one of my favorite scenes in the whole X-Men franchise. Yeah. The point between rage and serenity.
Yes.
He's trying to help Magneto perfect his powers. And Magneto says, I need the anger. And Professor X gives him a memory that he had forgotten about. A memory of him with his mother, who was killed during World War II by Nazis. And it's a memory of them lighting their Shabbos candle. And it's beautiful. And it's like, if you've ever lost someone, you can kind of take yourself there. Like, I have this memory with this person that was very special. And it does a lot for Magneto. It's almost like it expands his heart. And Professor X helps him. They move the giant satellite. And he says, there's so much more to you than rage. He says, when you learn to master your powers, there will be no one that can stop you, not even me. And it's like Magneto is riding the line this whole movie of being a hero and being a villain. And it's you buy their friendship, first of all. Like, these two guys, I love the fact that it shows them being friends, working together. And any X-Men movie, I love it when that happens, when Professor X and Magneto are on the same side and they're actively in the same scenes together. But man, Magneto, it's just like he's almost there and you want him to be there. It's like you feel really sad and let down when Magneto turns to the other side at the end of the movie, because after this, that powerful scene, such a great scene. I love it so much. Beautiful. One of the things that gives me the chills in the franchise is that scene.
It's like it's not like there's a lot happens in the scene. There's not like it's not a big sequence. It's just some really solid acting like coming across. Yeah, man.
And it's meaningful.
Yeah, it hits me in the feels, 100%, 100%. And like you say, it does make it even more traumatic by the end of the movie when he obviously takes the side he takes. But on a bit of a lighter note, can we just appreciate the fact that they got the OG Magneto helmet in this one?
Yeah. The helmet that changes in every movie,
Yeah, but this one looked legit though. This one looked like the old school Magneto helmet.
It did have the look, At the end, he added the horns at the end.
Yeah.
So that was even more comic booky. But I think it's a good touch to have, like, where did this fucking helmet come from? I think I watched one of the first movies with my wife, and she was like, "Where did you get that thing?" And it's like, oh, okay, well, it's gonna come up in another movie. So, he's got the helmet from Kevin Bacon, who had it specifically developed. Kevin Bacon's got his whole arsenal of mutants, right? He's got his evil mutants. He's basically like proto Magneto in what he's trying to do, because he kind of has the same ideology as Magneto, but he fucked up and he was a Nazi. So Magneto is never going to join this motherfucker because this guy killed his mother. But he's got these henchmen. We got Emma Frost. We got Azazel. We got Nightcrawler's fucking dad in this movie, who is Red Nightcrawler, basically, except way more evil and badass.
Yeah.
And then you got this stupid fucking lame tornado bitch, which is like, to me, like the porcupine guy. Like, he's got better powers, but I hate his power set. It's so corny.
I like the idea of the whole thing of like that. This is like the Hellfire Club. This is like sort of what they're called, and like it's just another nice sort of like comic book nod. Like, one thing I will mention is First Class feels the most comic book up until now. This one feels like X-Men comics, whereas the other ones have felt a little bit like we're still coming out of the 90s, so we need to be cool. No colors or anything like that. Keep everything muted. But this one, Oh my God. Give the costume designer a Twix. Give this
This one
guy,
has the benefit of being like a period piece as well. It's like
yeah,
what in the 60s?
yes. So they can get
So
away with.
they can get away with like a kind of a cornier aesthetic when it comes to what they're wearing when they wear those flight suits like later on.
But like
So I
they're
think
the
that works.
OG X-Men suits, like from like the first run of X-Men comics.
Yep.
So I really appreciated that one. The yellow and blue, man. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. But yeah, we get our sort of first look at like a first X-Men team within this world. Um I just want to ask you, because obviously we go from Kelsey Grammer, who plays a unbelievable beast in that film, to Nicholas Hoult. And Nicholas Hoult as Beast in this film has this connection with Mystique, played by Jennifer Lawrence. So while I do love this film, this is where the problems start really tearing in tearing in to these films for me.
Mm.
Does sort of start with how left field they go from the previous movies with Beast and Mystique, especially Mystique. Like,
The
I don't,
continuity of these movies is fucked.
yeah, it is. It really is. But like, it can be sort of, I can brush that to a side if characters are the same and act sort of the same. I can sort of give it a bit of leeway where that's concerned. But Mystique and Beast in this film are different characters to the prior movies.
Mystique
Like,
is 100% different. She kind of has a transition to original X-Men 2000 Mystique. I think throughout this, not necessarily this movie, but throughout the next movie, where she kind of starts becoming that type of Mystique. She is definitely not in this movie, but Beast is just one that kind of confused me because he has these weird feet,
yeah,
and I've always just wondered like what abilities does that give him? And they kind of like say it makes him super fast, but they don't really do much with that. And then he becomes the blue guy. I like that he becomes the blue guy. I can see why they don't keep him blue all the time, but Blue Beast in this movie looks like shit.
yeah,
I don't like the cat beast. I never have. Like there was a transition in the comics where he became like more of a cat than an ape.
yeah,
And I'm glad they shied away from that. And then the next one he's just like ape beast. Because the cat beast looks weird, dude.
yeah. It does. Not a fan at all. Not a fan. Sort of reminds me of like something you'd see in like I don't know, like Ridley Scott's Legend. Like so, some like just some terrible effect that's like belongs like in the Dark Crystal universe. Sort of. Was it Magic Crystal? One of the two. But
Yeah.
anyway,
It's Dark Crystal.
Dark Crystal, not good, not good. I don't like that take at all, to be honest. I don't mind Nicholas Hoult as an actor and stuff like that, but it's just Kelsey Grammer is so good in that role that it's like I can't bring myself. He has a couple of good scenes with James McAvoy throughout the next couple of films. Um, but yeah, mate, Jennifer Lawrence is Mystique. I don't know. I find her like sort of fine in this film, but I hate how much of an emphasis they put on Mystique in the next couple of films. She's like a full-on main character,
Oh yeah.
but to me, she's never been a main character in any medium, really. Like
I see where you're coming from.
Mystique wasn't a big thing in the comics for me, like ever, really. Animated series, yeah, sort of, but this Mystique is like a different Mystique than the comic, sort of.
They definitely did their own thing with Mystique in these movies, in all of the X-Men movies. They gave her a totally different look. They gave her basically different abilities where her fighting prowess is unique to her power set, which is uh, very unique to these movies. Like again, how slippery she is,
Yeah.
things like that. This movie also does give us another glimpse of Wolverine, who is in every X-Men movie up to a certain point, right? We get a small cameo from him where they try to recruit him. I loved that, seeing it at the time. I was like, yes, there he is. But of course, he's not going to be in this movie. He's not the focus of this movie. It's more Charles and Eric, right? More, maybe even more so Eric than anyone else.
Which we really should highlight, to be honest. Like, what are we here? Movie number 5, and this is the first movie where Wolverine hasn't been the focal point of the movie. So you've got to give it props to that. But it's just a testament to how good Fassbender and McAvoy are.
A lot of people hate on this movie because of Darwin, because of the way Darwin is killed. What do you think about the way Darwin is killed?
Darwin
is the guy that can adapt to survive.
Oh my God. I'm just totally blanking on this one.
All right. So Sebastian Shaw shows up at the CIA location where all like the new recruit X-Men are, right?
Yeah.
Him and Azazel fuck shit up. They take out all the guards, and then they recruit Zoe Kravitz. They recruit Angel, and then Darwin tries to stand up to Sebastian Shaw.
How do they nail him again?
So Darwin is supposed to adapt to survive, meaning like whatever kind of comes at him, his body will kind of create a defense mechanism for. At least that's kind of the way they set it up in the movie. Sebastian Shaw takes some of the energy that Havoc throws at him, and he turns it into a little ball, and he puts it in Darwin's mouth, and Darwin kind of like turns to like molten rock, and just kind of like explodes.
I remember.
And I know a lot of people called bullshit on that. They said, nope, he would adapt to it. What do you think?
Possibly, yeah. But I didn't come out the cinema crying about it. I was perfectly fine with it, to be honest.
I thought it was good that Shaw killed one of them. And I think if I remember correctly, I might be misremembering this, but when Darwin is introduced in the comic, he dies like the next issue or something. So it's like, it doesn't mean he's invincible. It just means that he can adapt to certain things.
And it's totally
I don't think yeah.
If he dies in the second issue, like he dies, he doesn't have a lot of screen time in this film. I totally forgot about him.
Yeah. Yeah. He's not a major player. That's for sure. Definitely doesn't carry over to the next movie. A lot of people don't.
No.
You know, I like how they get Banshee to fly. A lot of that training sequence to me is like really cool. Like seeing them like start to develop their powers. Professor X is doing his thing. He's helping mutants control their powers, and he's preparing them for a big showdown. I really like that.
It's a Rocky montage. It's great.
It is.
It's good. But yeah, I really like that scene with Banshee when he's learning to fly. What else do I want to say about this one? I do really enjoy it. Oh yeah, they bring in Moira McTaggart in this one, who's sort of like she's a mainstay in the X-Men comics. She's in and out of them a lot.
We also got to go back real quick for a sec, because I know the continuity of these movies is fucked. Professor X dies at the end of 3, but after the credits, Moira McTaggart is standing over a comatose body that opens its eyes, not Patrick Stewart, and she says, "Good morning, Professor," or something like that. So I don't know if we want to get into the after credits of many of these or all of these, but some of them don't make sense.
Well, I think they just contradict themselves, don't they, with some of these end credits, especially that one. But yeah, I didn't get into the end credits of these films, Corey. So if you want to take the end credits segment, you take it, mate.
All right, I'll bring it up when appropriate.
But yeah, what other bits? I really like the end of this film, the third act, the climactic battle as such. I think it's cut pretty well. I think the showdown between Shaw and Magneto pretty good. I like how he, like the scene, the callback at the start of the film to the intro of the first X-Men movie. There's like that emphasis on the coin. So he's like, move the coin, and he can't move the coin, and his mum ends up getting shot. So
he puts the coin through Shaw's head, and like Professor X is like freezing Shaw, right? Yeah. So he's in stasis.
Yeah.
And you get the feeling that Professor X feels the pain that Shaw is feeling while the coin goes through, because it cuts to him screaming while it's going through.
Yes.
And, Professor X does not want Magneto to kill him because he knows that will take him over the edge to full on villain mode. And Magneto's been riding that line, and it's a fracture in their relationship, and it's very well done. I feel like it's real. I do believe Magneto, in everything he does. He wants his revenge, and he's getting it no matter what. I'm sorry, Professor X's speeches are not going to work. This man is after blood. And now that he's finished that, it's on to mutant supremacy. And a lot of that is because of the way non-mutants react to their presence. They're like, all right, just fire everything we got on them. They're on that little island. Let's just destroy them. And Magneto's like, this is what they want for us. And he's kind of right.
Yeah.
Well,
this is the thing with X-Men. I think this is why it's such a fascinating property to begin with, because the line is blurred when it comes to the villains in this property, especially with Magneto. Especially, and a lot of the time in modern day X-Men comics now, he's part of the X-Men, he's part of the team. But yeah, X-Men First Class, I think, is one of the best X-Men movies in this franchise. 100%.
Probably the best one for my money. It's such a great movie. It's self-contained in its own way, develops relationships really well in the broader scope of the X-Men stories. Really great stuff. I love it a lot. There's some good action at the end, but this movie doesn't need as much action as I think some of the other ones need, because this one it's like so personal. There's like so much like tragedy and friendship. For example, when Charles gets shot because Magneto is like reflecting the bullets away, and it's basically Magneto's fault that Charles gets the bullet in his back and he's paralyzed moving forward. You genuinely feel like Magneto, Eric, is sad about this. Like it's a tragic thing. Like he feels really bad about this because this is his friend. They built this movie up, developing their friendship, and you feel that connection, and it feels real.
Yeah, 100%. Like they've got a really good scene coming up later on that'll hone in on when we get there. But yeah, overall, X-Men First Class, really good. Really good. Probably is my favorite out of the bunch. I would rate that one high. Then next, we are moving over back to the solo Wolverine franchise. So we come to 2013, and it is the release of The Wolverine, directed by James Mangold. It was pretty decent. I like James Mangold.
What is he known for?
He did Identity with John Cusack. He did James Mangold. He's done Ford versus Ferrari.
Okay.
Yeah, he's been around the block. I think he's done. What else has he done? He's done a couple of things, but James Mangold knows his way around a camera. But yeah, The Wolverine.
So we had just gotten a Wolverine movie 2 movies ago.
Yeah.
And they said, we're doing it again.
Oh, no. I really like this film. Shortcomings and all. I don't think it's amazing. Like, I remember seeing it and coming out of cinema and being like, that was way better than the first Wolverine film.
I had the same reaction.
But I wasn't like entirely blown away by it. I think the ending falls short a little bit. I don't mind the big mechanical silver samurai, but it's not what it is in the comics, though, is it? It's completely different from what that is. Not a good ending.
I don't understand this movie. That's my problem with it. I don't know what the fuck is going on. This movie has a great opening, though. And, we talked about the openings meaning a lot in these X-Men movies. It's Wolverine during World War II as a POW in Japan. And this is at a big moment in Japan because they're about to receive a nuke. And he's in this like well, right? And he saves this guy's life, essentially. I think this whole opening is very like mysterious and intriguing. And it's like, what does it lead up to? If I was going to say that this was one of the great moments, yeah, I'll say it. This is probably the great moment, I think, of what I consider to be the lesser X-Men movies. I'm not in love with this movie. I think it's good until it isn't.
Yes, perfect. Yeah.
There's a lot of like mystery in this movie. Like I feel like we're going to learn some big information all the time. And when the information is doled out, one, I don't quite understand what it is. And two, it just doesn't come together the way I expected. It's not a satisfying payoff because it's like this mysterious journey of Wolverine in Japan. I mean, there's some things leading up to it, which I'll talk about shortly. But the journey itself is really engaging because there's a lot of mystery behind it. But I don't quite know the relationships of the characters well enough to like kind of understand what the end means.
Yeah. It's just a bit non-consequential, this film. Nothing of any sort of meaningfulness to the broader scope of the rest of the X-Men films. And really, Logan's journey happens in this film. It's just sort of, like you say, pleasant until it's not pleasant right at the end. But yeah, the intro, I've got to piggyback on that one. Wolverine taking an atomic bomb to the back. Pretty brilliant. Pretty good. Pretty looks great visually. Like,
Nuts. Yeah.
just,
How he's just like charred to shit.
yeah, he's burned to a crisp, mate. Like, yeah, man. Cool opening. Um,
I also like the idea of him living off the grid outside of the school. He's not at the X mansion anymore. Professor X is dead, presumably. Jean Grey is definitely dead. And he's haunted by those experiences, right? Now he's living with even more demons than he had before when he showed up to the school the first time. So, like, he's off the grid. He's got the long hair and the beard. And he's just kind of like this crazy dude that lives in the woods by himself and is kind of a survivalist. And a lot of like Wolverine comics are him living in this state. And I like that as well. It's like a cool setup. It's like, okay, so what's his life like now? It's like he dreams of Jean. And I love that they included Famke Johnson,
yeah,
you know,
100%.
in his
But
dream sequences. She's always kind of like calling to him, like, she's like, when are you going to join me, Logan? Like, I'm waiting here for you in the afterlife, and you need to come join me. So he kind of has this lingering idea in his head that he is ready to die.
yeah, and I like that they do use that Jean Grey aspect of it. Like how many movies that we're in now, what, 6 movies or whatever it is. Like where I was saying earlier on in X2, like it's an element that I was never really that much of a fan of until it sort of pays off in Last Stand. But they're still keeping this up, they're keeping it going. So it's obviously like a really big traumatic thing that's happened in his life. But
It might
yeah,
work best in this movie than any other, really.
possibly, yeah, and I feel like he does sort of overcome that by the end of the film. Like his arc in this film is sort of overcoming that and accepting it, whereas he really hadn't accepted it. I don't think in Origins. I know he moves on with a different woman and stuff and that, but yeah, it still sort of felt not as good, not as well in this film. But yeah, I don't mind it. Like the Yakuza is like a enemy in this one. Like they get overused quite a lot in a lot of movies. I thought they could have done something a little bit extra with it in this one. Not just Wolverine fighting a bunch of Yakuza, which is fine, but like I don't know, I wanted more abilities somewhere.
There's
Um,
some good moments in there, but yeah, it's like it would be nice to see him take on someone more formidable,
yeah,
right? And you kind of get that at the end, but I hate the end. I hate the big mech suit guy with the fucking giant sword. To me, I mean, Silver Samurai aside, right? Obviously, that's not the comic character, the Silver
no.
Samurai. They just put the name on it, so it's in name only. But even that aside, I just don't think that makes for a great action sequence. Why not just have someone like that is formidable, like the actual Silver Samurai or Omega Red or something, someone that can actually go toe to toe with this motherfucker.
Or just had I can't remember what the actor's called or who the character is in this, but I think he's the brother in this of who Logan's trying to protect. He was recently just in John Wick 4. He was the hotel owner of the concierge in the first hotel that
Yes.
they go to. He's the owner basically. But I think he's got a couple of scenes in this film. He's a really good actor. He's amazing. I mean, he was just Scorpion in the new Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, yeah.
Have him dress up as the Silver Samurai at the end and get involved with that and just have a really decent one-on-one like hand combat scene would have been amazing.
Not the overly CGI spectacle. It's too much. And the end of this movie is all just too much, like the last 40 minutes or so. And again, I don't really understand this movie. Like I rewatched it again and I came out of it not really knowing what was going on. Right. So the relationships of all the main players in this movie and like what the villains want are things that are unclear to me after watching it. And that's a problem, I think.
Yeah.
The
totally.
ride, Wolverine going on a journey with Mariko and like having to protect her, that makes sense. But then when it gets to the why, doesn't make sense, doesn't work. And I remembered this movie pretty fondly, but when I rewatched it, I was like, no, I don't think so.
It's just fine. It's not amazing, but it's not Wolverine Origins either. I will say to the fact, I know it's a pretty simple thing to bring up, but I do like the fact of the simplicity of Logan's just protecting this woman because she needs protection, and it's his like superhero sort of heroic side coming out of like that is deep down he might be as like he go for all them rage outs and stuff like that, but deep down he's a hero who's like here to protect sort of thing. But yeah, overall the Wolverine, it's just a fine movie. I think it's pretty amazing that James Mangold is the same director who directed Logan. And like that is like a clear step up from this film in sort of every aspect.
Oh yeah.
Especially on like an emotional level. Whereas I think this one plays a bit loose and fast with the emotions. There isn't really a lot of them there, to be honest.
I want to real quick talk about post-credit scene on X-Men Origins, the Wolverine.
Okay.
There's two. So when I rewatched it, the post-credit scene was Weapon 11. Is that Deadpool in that movie at the end when he has all the powers of Cyclops and everyone else?
Yeah.
His head gets chopped off. It's his head laying in debris and his eyes open.
Yeah.
When I saw it in theaters, it was a different scene. It was Logan drinking at a bar in Japan, clearly leading to this movie. And the bartender says, "Are you drinking to forget?" And he says, "No, I'm drinking to remember." So the idea being the next time we'll see him, he will be in Japan.
I'll have to look that up because I don't think I've seen that one. The only one I've seen is that awful Deadpool head where he opens his eyes, but I'll have to check that one out, man.
This one kind of has a post-credit scene of its own, though. And that is the return of Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart as Magneto and Professor X when Wolverine is traveling. And again, continuity problems, right? Professor X is alive and in his old body now. I don't quite know how it works, but they basically find Logan to say something bad is coming and we're going to need you, which does kind of carry over into the next movie.
Yeah, which does bring us to our next movie. Days of Future Past, which came out in 2014, directed again by Bryan Singer, who comes back into the fold this time. I just want to say this first thing. This is the first X-Men film to use that nifty little when the Fox Studios logo comes up and
okay.
And it leaves the X. I just thought that was a fun.
That theme song fucking slaps from the 90s, dude.
Oh, good, mate. But yeah. So it's. I won't give away my opinions just yet, but I would say the majority of fans out there have this one in pretty high regard. I actually think this one's a little bit overhyped. There's stuff in it that I definitely appreciate, but just when I was doing like my research for this pod, it just seems like Days of Future Past is like one that people really, really fucking love.
I'm one of those people. I love it even more on my most recent rewatch.
Go for it.
One thing that I loved even then and I love now is the action in the dystopian future that these remaining mutants live in.
Mate, does it remind you of T2 at all? And like the opening of T2?
Yes.
It reminds me of like after Judgment Day and what this would look like.
Wow. That is a very good point. Like the bodies and shit and the debris and the bones that's all around.
Yeah, a lot of blues. A lot of blues.
Yeah, that Judgment Day world is like perpetually a blue night sky, you know?
Yeah. But it was just one of my recent rewatch. It was just when I was watching it, I was like, this is giving me total like Terminator 2 vibes, like this dystopian sort of after Judgment Day, what the hell would this look like sort of thing. But yeah, I'll let you carry on, mate. I just thought I'd get that one in there. I know you're a T2 fan, so.
Oh, absolutely. And when it comes to the action scenes in the dystopian future of X-Men Days of Future Past, it's really everything I've ever wanted in an action scene in an X-Men movie. We get to see, they're not actually called the X-Men, but we get to see a group of mutants that are basically the X-Men. Some of them are former X-Men fighting a group of enemies. Now, in this case, the enemies are the new Sentinels. It's like the new versions of them. So they're different and you may like them, you may not. I'll set that aside for now. What's important to me is that they made this action epic.
It really is. I'll second that. Totally.
The mutants that use their powers, Iceman is properly using Iceman powers where he's sliding around. It's almost like he creates a ice like
wave
slope for him to like cruise on, and he like spins around an enemy and he does like very classic Iceman stuff instead of just like shooting a beam, you know? It's more sophisticated than that. He's now kind of like more in tune with his power set. We get Blink, who is fucking OP. I love the idea of Blink creating these portals, especially to assist her fellow mutants fighting the Sentinels. The way they do that, like she creates a portal here, the guy jumps through it or shoots a beam through it, it hits the Sentinel in the back. That's all so good. Sunspot, fucking amazing. It's like, cool, we get a new mutant and you can tell what his powers are right away. We see Bishop taking energy from Sunspot and putting it into his weapon. Epic. It's at the very beginning and it's at the kind of at the very end, not at the end, but near the end when we get to see the two big action scenes with these characters play out. And I just think they're done masterfully. And again, it's everything I've ever wanted in an X-Men movie with these action scenes.
It's because of like the teamwork, I think, in that scene.
That's it.
It's like they're working as a team, and it's like not the first chance we've had to see that, but like you say, like I love the costume design of they've all got them like dressed up like quite distinctive from one another. The introduction to Bishop, you're right. I could have done with a bit more Bishop, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
But really good visually and stuff. That
The thing
whole
that sucks
sequence,
is they get their asses kicked.
yeah, totally. But the X-Men often do as well.
Good point.
But yeah, man, like it starts off fantastic, and yeah, we'll get on the Sentinels a little bit later. I think or we can get into them now.
Yeah, what do you think about him? I think you have problems with this version of the Sentinels, right? Because there's two distinct versions of Sentinels in this movie.
So I appreciate the second version that we get later, which is supposed to be like the older version of the Sentinels. You know, they're trying sort of to make them look like comic book accurate, but I just think this film's budget, and obviously it was a high budget, there was a lot going on. I think they just slackened a little bit on the look of the Sentinels, like, and I don't like the scale of them, sorry. Way too small for me.
Well, they developed these Sentinels with Mystique's like
which is
DNA technology.
Which is, I was going to say, I appreciate the story element to the Sentinels, the future ones of like where they've, you know, he's adopted Mystique's powers and other powers, so like these Sentinels will like learn powers and absorb powers and stuff. Like I get it. I just think on a visual sort of aspect, I wasn't a fan. And the fact it's like in the 70s, they could have definitely had these like overbearing sort of bulky sentinels for the older version. I don't know, man. I don't know. It was a bit of it was a massive problem for me because like obviously when this got announced, Days of Future Past, we obviously knew they were going to play a major part of this film. So I just feel ultimately I was just a little bit let down by them. It was a thing that was anticipated since that Danger Room scene. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
like you thought, well, what the hell are these going to look like? They'll look amazing. And you know, I might understand for budgetary reasons why they weren't so massive, but I don't know, man. There's a got a lot of stars in this film, a lot of star power, a lot of there must have been some money behind this film. It looks like a big epic film. Definitely
Yeah. And for my money, it feels like it. The stakes are high in this movie,
yeah.
higher than they've ever been in another X-Men movie. The future sucks. The future always sucks in a sci-fi movie, but the future is really bad, especially for mutants here and for mutant collaborators. They all have the same fate. So they have to send someone back in time to kind of correct the future. This part never really understood, right? Because Kitty Pryde, she can phase people back in this time. So I kind of get the idea that their powers have evolved as they've matured, right? Kitty Pryde, she can't just phase through objects anymore. She can phase a consciousness through time. That's a comic book thing. Fine, whatever. Bothered me at first. I got over it. But she said the human mind can only handle so much before it breaks. But Wolverine's mind can heal, I guess. That to me kind of is a little bit of a stretch on top of what is already a little bit of a stretch. You know what I mean? It's like, well, how can his mind heal? What does that even mean? What even is a mind?
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from, but who else would it have been? I think if it was going to be anyone, it would be Wolverine. Just it makes sense because of his like healing factor or whatever. I find it
Send back Porcupine Guy.
yeah,
Make him the stand-in for Wolverine.
yeah, man. Imagine if Ray Park's just come out and it was that original Toad again.
It's send back Toad. Yeah,
I'm here again.
Toad's got a wicked tongue. He
Yeah,
can convince anyone.
yeah. Even the producers to let him back in this franchise. Why is Ray Park's not doing more? Like you should be doing way more. He's like,
He's a weird dude. He posted. Did you hear about what he posted on Instagram like last year?
no, is this why he doesn't do a lot?
He posted like him getting a BJ from his girlfriend
Oh, really?
on his social media. It was
All
up
right.
for like a very short amount of time before it was deleted, but it was people made copies.
Wait, there you go. That's it. Gonna have to go and find Darth Maul's peni after this one.
Yeah, it had little horns on the tip.
Brilliant. Double ended. But Days of Future Past. Brilliant film. Brilliant film. I like this is the first time we're sort of seeing the old and the new. And I've got to give Bryan Singer props for making it work. It wasn't
Oh yeah.
jarring. And there's like a really good scene between young Charles Xavier and old Charles Xavier, sort of midway through the film. It's really good, emotional, sort of powerful scene again.
Hope.
Yeah, basically.
We need you to hope again, he
Yeah,
tells him. Because this is a broken Charles Xavier. Because the way the world started going after X-Men First Class was like, you know, Magneto started doing really bad shit. Some of the mutants died. They were experimented on by the government. And Professor X just couldn't do this shit anymore. And he kind of lives in isolation with Hank. And Wolverine has to bring him out of that rut. And it's not just Wolverine, but you're right. It's Professor X's future self. And that really good scene. They take a lot of care with the dialogue for Professor X, I think.
yeah, 100%. And like, he really is in a bad place in this film. Like, he's taking drugs, so it's like he can walk again, basically. Because I bear in mind at the end of First Class, he gets obviously his back shot out. But by taking these drugs and him being able to walk again, he loses his powers, doesn't he? Like his like psychic.
Yeah, and he doesn't want his powers anymore.
No.
It's too much for him to handle at this point in his life. But I like where how it turns and how like he kind of comes back to the Professor X that we know, and this is how he does it. There's some good stuff in there.
100%, 100%. I just want to ask you about a certain sequence that takes place with Evan Peters, um, at the Pentagon. What do we think about this scene? Because it's pretty fantastic.
One of the best scenes in the movie.
Yeah,
Amazing. In a movie that there's already a few scenes that I like. I think they made the Quicksilver scene in that kitchen perfectly. It's a fucking beautiful thing to see. I was blown away when I saw that scene. I couldn't believe I saw this in theaters multiple times. That's how much I liked this movie. And I remember the second time I took someone who was a very big Evan Peters fan, and I was like, "Oh, wait till you see this scene." And it's so good. I remember watching it bootleg online, rewatching it because this movie was only in theaters, so all you could watch is like the whatever handy cam version of the
yeah.
movie. And I remember watching that particular scene, and you hear people laughing in the audience and stuff. And I loved it so much. It's just so well executed, but also Quicksilver is fucking OP.
He is, and I
He is
think
way OP.
I think the filmmakers knew that as well because he's not actually in the film that much.
Yeah.
Um,
Like you stay here. We're gonna go finish the mission.
yeah, man, totally. And one of the things that I really appreciate in that scene is when Magneto's escaped with them and they're in an elevator, and it's just great because they don't make a big deal about it throughout the entire franchise, apart from this one little line that's in this elevator. And you've got Magneto there, and you've got Evan Peters there. And Evan Peters, Quicksilver asks Magneto, he's like, "Oh, so what do you do then?" He was like, "Oh, I control metal." And he looks up and he's like, "Oh, my mum knew someone who could do that once." I'm like, "Yeah, man, that's so sick." And
Biblically.
they never bring back again either. Like, because obviously, as X-Men fans, we know that that's his dad. Magneto is Quicksilver's dad. So it's just like, I don't know, like that recognition of like the comics and stuff like that, I always appreciated.
Oh yeah.
They
Well, I
don't,
remember at the time that blew me away.
yeah, they
You
just
know, now
don't
it's
make a
kind of
big
old
deal.
hat because I've seen this movie so many times. But at the time, I was like, oh shit.
It was just how to do like an Easter egg, subtly but nice.
Great
Nice.
fan service moment.
Yes, that's the correct term.
Now I want to ask you, when you rewatch this, if you did you watch the road cut or the theatrical cut?
I haven't seen the road cut at all.
What?
Yeah, I know that's really bad. I was going to watch it for this, but I ended up just deking out and watching the normal version. But
For me, it's just road cut, and that's it now. Now that I've seen it, that's the only one. So the road cut is where Wolverine sees Stryker. He freaks out in his other body in the future, stabs Kitty Pryde. She's dying and cannot hang on to him. So they need someone that can take Kitty's place.
right,
The only person they could think of is Rogue, who does still have her powers, but Rogue is being experimented on in the Professor X mansion by the government, who have taken over that as kind of like a facility of their own. So Iceman and Magneto take a secret passage into the mansion to rescue Rogue. In the process, Iceman gets killed by Sentinels. So Magneto does bring Rogue back. Rogue takes Kitty's powers and takes the place of Kitty, keeping Wolverine in the past.
interesting. So in the regular cut, how does Iceman get killed?
He's just not there anymore.
Oh, right. Something I didn't notice. Didn't notice at all. I need to watch a roll cut. I was half tempted to watch a roll cut, but then I was like, I'm just gonna start complicating things for myself if I do that. Do you recommend the roll cut?
Yeah, I think it's, to get the full picture, yes. And I like this movie so much. To me, part of it is just getting more of this movie. I I think the story in this movie is really solid. I do like that they've evolved Mystique into something else, where she is the point in between the previous movie, First Class, and original Recipe X-Men, where she's more vicious now. She's been kind of like trained and groomed by Magneto to be this killer. And she is more capable in combat. Also, we got to mention that Beast looks normal again. He looks like Ape Beast as opposed to that weird cat fucking thing we got previously.
100%.
And they keep this look for the rest of the movies that he's in, which is a few.
Yeah. It was jarring, that first look in First Class. I think me and you are a little bit on polar ends, opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to Mystique, 100%. And I don't know whether this is just like a personal thing for me that like I haven't got anything against Jennifer Lawrence. I just don't think she's the best actor in the world. And I think around this time, in a couple of years beforehand, they were really trying to make her a thing. So to have like this much emphasis put on Mystique, yet again, is good for the film. But when they go the next two films, Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix, that sort of goes out the window again. She's nice Mystique again. Like there was an effort, I agree with you, in Days of Future Past, where there's like this merging of the two, but doesn't go far enough, in my opinion. Yeah, she is trying to kill the president. I get it, but like, not a major fan of that aspect of it. Might be another reason why I'm not so down with this as everyone else seems to be with this particular.
Oh yeah, that's probably a factor for sure. Because she's such a big player in this movie. Like her role is so crucial to the events of the future of this movie. So obviously her character has a very large significance within the plot of this movie.
How do we find like sort of the closer to this film, like its third act? What are you saying about that one at the football stadium?
I love it mostly for the action in the future because it's intercutting between the past and the future. And the future is like a doomed proposition. Like they can do pretty well against the Sentinels, but they cannot beat them.
No.
You know, they can hold them off for a time. I just like the use of that. It's so comic booky, right? Them using all their powers to fight the Sentinels for their own survival. But it's really the past that's going to dictate if they are able to overcome this or not. And of course they do. You know, it's a decent showdown in the past scenes, in the scenes when they're in the 60s. I think the guy that plays Nixon looks a lot like Nixon.
Yeah.
There's a funny moment, though, where Wolverine, as it goes to like fight a Sentinel, and he has his bone claws, and he goes and he like punches it. And I'm like, what are you going to do? Yeah. What are you going to do to this like alloy? Like,
what's the game plan here?
Yeah, you can't do anything against these. And then Beast at least is a little more effective. Like he jumps on top of the Sentinels. He's like ripping out like pieces of them, like ripping out wires and shit. I like that. The past Sentinels, just some like weird things about them. Like Magneto fills them with like metal, but then like he like can control their computer chips in them too somehow. Cause like he tells them to like target the mutants. But like that wouldn't work. He can just control their movements. He can't like control their inner display screen and shit.
I was going to ask about that one. Normally, I can let things like that go in films. Like, I'm pretty cool with it. If something doesn't make sense, I can let it go. But that one, when he's putting, you know, what is it? He rips a load of train tracks, metal off the train tracks, and he puts spaghetti metal in the Sentinels, and it just sort of, I don't know. Yeah, does that work?
No, it's one of those things. You got to put it in the one of those things box, you know?
Just one of them things box. I love that.
Yeah, there's kind of a lot of those in these movies, but that's okay. The way this movie ends proper, though, because of course the heroes do succeed, right? They make the future better by not assassinating the president. So things start to go well. They prevent Magneto from doing what he wants to do. Wolverine goes to a new future where things are better, and Kelsey Grammer is Beast again. So of course things are better, right?
Yeah.
I really like that. I like that we get to see those original recipe X-Men again. Were you into that?
I liked it. I don't. You can't not like that scene if you've sort of grew up with these films at this point. Like it's sort of like a nice. It's like a soft version of what like No Way Home was for like Spider-Man. Do you know what I mean? It was just like, oh yeah, we're back with the gang again. Are we going to get more James Marsden Cyclops now? Are we going to get a really good storyline with that? No, 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 no.
But Jean is alive again. That's important to Wolverine's character.
And I think
even though she's with Scott again, it's like back to square one, bitch.
But it's probably some closure for him as well. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, it's a good end. It's a good ending. It's a good ending to if I'm just going to take my opinions out of it, it's objectively a really good X-Men film. And they do what they can with that particular comic. It wasn't a massive comic, if like back in the day. It's only a couple of issues worth of like a trade paperback. It's not like a giant story. It never was. I think they had a good run of it on the animated series, but yeah, Days of Future Past, quality film. Not one of my favorites, but I see why it gets all the love.
It ends with such finality. Like that could be the last X-Men movie, you know? Yeah. The future is fixed. The past and the future have both reconnected and kind of meshed into one thing. I guess you could say they fixed all their continuity problems by changing the timeline, if you want. Although there were problems before this, way before this, with just the involvement of Sabretooth in the first movie and X-Men Origins Wolverine. Not the same guy, obviously. It's supposed to be the same guy. But, you know, it ends with finality, and it can be seen as a good closure. And maybe it should be, for considering what we have next.
What? Not a fan of Ivan Ooze?
No? I am a fan of Ivan Ooze, actually.
Look, right, that point's being done to death, right? But with it being me and you on this podcast, I thought I've got to bring that one up. Right, guys, we're moving on to a lesser film than the previous one. X-Men Apocalypse. Director again, Bryan Singer. Definitely his last film. Might have been one of his last films in general, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, no, he did the Oscar award-winning film Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah. I think he got took off halfway through that film.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. All the shit went down halfway through that film, so they got someone else in there. I think just put their name on it as the credits. But yeah, let's just start off with the first thing this film gets wrong. Massively wrong, right? So, like Days of Future Past, one of the biggest issues I have with that film is not on a story element, but a visual element when it comes to the Sentinels. I wasn't a fan. I wish they'd sort of made them look more comic book accurate for them ones. And another character that absolutely needs to be comic book accurate, I think, is Apocalypse. Now, when they mentioned Oscar Isaac, I thought, yeah, that's cool. Like, it's going to be a completely CGI character anyway, so we'll be fine. We'll be cool. Like, Oscar Isaac, he's a decent actor. He'll bring something good to the voice.
I think he's awesome. He's an amazing actor, in my opinion.
Unbelievable.
But not here.
No, absolutely not his finest moment whatsoever. But I think Oscar Isaac was sort of doomed before the shooting of the film, like, because I can't remember. Well, I probably can, but I really remember when the first images of this came out and everyone on the internet jumped on and said, "Oh yeah, this literally looks like Ivan Ooze out of the Power Rangers movie."
They did fix him after those complaints. They changed like the way he had a purple hue to him in those early photos.
Yeah.
And they did slightly change that, but he still looks like shit.
He still looks like shit. Like, they color corrected it, but that wasn't the bit that needed correcting. Like, I don't know what I was expecting.
I seen a cosplayer that like fucking nailed Apocalypse one time, and it was around the release of this movie. And I couldn't believe that the movie looked so fucked up compared to this cosplayer.
I think I know the image I've seen the image that you're talking about, and
it went viral. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. It's like, for me, like, something as iconic looking as what Apocalypse does look like. Yeah, I don't know. It was really hard for me to get into this film. luckily, it's just a pretty shitty film all around. There's
It
that,
sucks,
yeah,
man.
it's really bad. Like there's certain aspects that I could maybe say I like, but majority of it is like pretty piss poor. They give like this sort of feeling that they're gonna, we've had James Marsden as Cyclops and we've totally fucked him over. We've shafted him in every film. So they recast him. You get a younger guy in to play him, Ty Sheridan, who's a really good actor. I think he's been in some good films. He was in a good film a few years back called Mud, Matthew McConaughey, pretty decent, but he's a lot younger in that film. Um, yeah, they sort of squander that one as well. Like, I don't mind Ty Sheridan's performance in it, but I thought this was like the chance to like elevate that character up a little bit, and it doesn't happen.
They do absolutely nothing with Cyclops from here on out. Like he
No,
is a waste of space. He's as useless as he is in X-Men Origins Wolverine. He's just like I can't even tell you anything about his character at all, other than as it relates to his powers. They do nothing with him. They don't want to do anything with him. I feel like they just feel like they need to have him to have Jean.
I just think that's bizarre though, because I think like if you ever think of the X-Men, the core X-Men, Cyclops is in there. Like
Yeah.
he's the leader of the team, like in most cases.
Yep.
Certainly not Wolverine.
But here we have boring milk toast version of Cyclops. This movie, it tried to do some things that I think might have been cool if I didn't see them coming a mile away. Like, for example, Magneto's just trying to live a simple life off the grid, with his newfound family. Of course, they're going to die. He's going to be brought back into the fold. It's like as predictable as you would think. Fortunately, Fassbender's a great actor.
Yeah.
And he can sell the emotion behind it. There's just a lot of chaos in these movies, I feel like. Apocalypse shows up. He needs to recruit mutants. He can amplify their powers. At one point, he goes to Caliban and Psylocke. And he's like, I need another member of my horsemen. And Psylocke's like, you need someone really powerful? I know a guy. And it's the fucking guy that just has wings. Like, why did they choose Angel for that scene? That is fucking bizarre. I remember thinking at the time, like, there are so many powerful mutants, but he's the guy you're getting just because they did that in the comics, I guess.
Fair enough, but that was going to be my point there, though. Like, if it wasn't going to be Angel, I'd have probably had a couple of problems with that one. It's a shame that they didn't make him look as epic as what he does in the comics. Like, he looks badass when he's Dark Angel. He looks
Yeah.
unreal. But yeah, it's funny. Like this guy who plays Angel in this movie, had the actor written down, but it's just funny because it's like Angel's played by Ben Foster in the first, iteration of that character, and Ben Foster is an amazing actor. But then in this one, they get Ben Hardy's called, and he's on like a really shit soap in the UK called EastEnders, and like it really depresses the fuck out of me. And like
Oh,
this is where
so
they
they're
found
doing
this
it to bring in everyone's mom. So like the moms can come for him, you know?
basically. But like I don't know, like that took me out of it so much, and it's just a me thing. But like if you're from the UK and you're like watching this, you're like, oh my god, we went from Ben Foster to this guy out of EastEnders, for fuck's sake, man. And it's really bad. I think the effects in this film look pretty terrible. I don't know how with 2016, and some of the effects in this movie look worse than prior.
Oh, dude, the whole third act is a fucking CGI disaster. I
It's
hate comic book movies that do this when this is like one of the light in the sky movies. I don't know if there actually is a light in the sky in this case, but it's like Green Lantern, like third act. Like it's like, just CGI disaster, debris everywhere, stuff flying all over, and lights, huge, useless spectacle that means nothing to anyone.
we haven't got out of that stage. I don't feel like
Probably right.
still. Like I feel like we see a lot of that today. I think from like 2006 to like when this film came out, 2016, and a little bit now, we were just like overwhelmed with that third act structure. He was in every single superhero film. When was this? 2016. I think Suicide Squad came out the same year as this.
Same third act problem in that movie.
Same third act
Just
problem,
a nightmare disaster of bullshit.
Yeah, I don't know which film's worse, to be honest. But
this one's probably worse.
do you think then the Suicide Squad? Probably, yeah. I think so. Maybe.
This movie tries to do something. It tries to recapture the magic of Quicksilver. You remember that?
Oh yeah, and I've literally got this written down. It just feels like a horrible, forced, like implemented. Right. How good was that scene in Days of Future Past? Right. Let's just do the exact same thing again, but this time because we're set in the 80s, we can have an 80s tune on, man. Yeah, let's go. No,
they tried way too hard with this fucking thing, and I remember everyone raving about it. Like people online were sharing this video, be like, "That Quicksilver scene was awesome, though," and I was like, "No, the original one was awesome. This one was too much," and they're doing a little bit too much with this power set. Like they're making him way too OP. So of course, when it comes time to beat Apocalypse, I'm like, so this guy can just beat Apocalypse, I guess, because he's OP. Like, but Apocalypse disables his legs.
Yeah. Shit. We're gonna have to write something else. That could have been such an easy way out for the writers. But yeah, like, and also in this film, we start getting our hints at where the next film's gonna go. And I remember because I was working at a bar when this came out, 2016. I was living in Manchester at the time. And I remember finishing work and going at this point, and still to this day, I see a lot of films by myself. I just go to the cinema by myself. That's
hell yeah.
My partner, I've been with her nearly 12 years this year, and I think she stopped coming at like Iron Man 3. She was like, I'm done. I'm like, fair enough. That's fine.
I could see someone tapping out at Iron Man 3.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it was tapped out. I could see it, but it was fair enough. But yeah, we get our first glimpse at the Phoenix Saga 2.0 again in this film. It sort of ends with that, doesn't it? It's like Sophie Turner, who plays Jean Grey, ends with like the shot of like Phoenix Force coming out there, and it's being awakened or whatever. Well, technically, I don't know how it does awaken in this film because it gets awakened in the next film when they actually go to space, but that's another story. But I remember being in the cinema and going, oh my God, are we doing this one again? Are we going here again? I find it fascinating that they're so hell-bent on doing this storyline. And for a fine fact, when we're 10 years deep in the MCU, X-Men, that is going to come back again. And we'll get that green and yellow costume.
I swear to God, it better not.
It will come back, Corey. I tell you what, mate.
I'm done with it. We're all done with it.
Yeah, man.
We don't want it.
Don't want it, right? We don't want it. But I can imagine him doing it comic book legit, which is like, that's the only way they could do it, I think, if they went fully out of space and had like galactic empires falling down from the Phoenix Force and stuff like that. I think if they wanted to
maybe. I think if they're going to do it, the best way to do it would be in the Avengers versus X-Men fashion. Because at least then it's like
mix it up a bit.
Yeah, it's like have this like, I guess, kind of second civil war among heroes to try to prevent this force from being acquired by Jean. But I don't know, you can't really do it without having the Phoenix Force be known to people and like the repercussions of it already be known to people. So I don't know. I just don't want it.
No.
Just give me some regular X-Men shit. You don't have to necessarily do the most famous storylines. Dark Phoenix is not a storyline that I particularly like anyway. So just like having it, I don't think is necessarily needed. But yeah, that is how they defeat Apocalypse, the undefeatable. Because, Apocalypse just wipes out the whole fucking team. So, of course, Jean, inner power, overcomes him. Whatever, anticlimactic. The third act isn't good anyway. The only thing I really like about the third act is Nightcrawler's use of powers, which it's good to see him like do some more, even though he's not quite where he is in the next movie, but at least he's doing stuff.
I was going to ask you, like, how do you feel about this iteration of Nightcrawler?
I hate his 80s hair a lot.
Yep, same.
But he's okay. Young Nightcrawler. He's not quite Alan Cumming, but I'm all right with him.
I can see them two merging as one person later on down the line. but
Yep.
wasn't too far off. But mate, this movie's a piece of shit. I've got nothing else to say about it. I fucking hate it. Have you got anything else to say about this one?
I don't like it at all. It's of course the most egregious ending of next time they're gonna be the X-Men.
Oh
And
my god, how did we forget? Shit, yeah, man.
I meant to bring that up in more movies, but this movie does it the worst.
Yeah.
It
Totally.
ends with them like in the danger room wearing the costumes. The door closes and it's like, all right, next time they're gonna be the X-Men for sure. God damn it, stop it with this.
It's insane, isn't it? Like, and we're like 8 movies in at this point. Like, next time, guys, next time. And when they do it next time, them suits are nowhere to be seen. They got rid of them straight.
Yeah.
But sticking with the shit, and I don't know whether it gets worse or better for you here, but we do arrive to Dark Phoenix.
Yep. So this was not the next movie in terms of release dates, but this is the next one we're going to talk about.
Oh yeah, disclaimer. I should have said this right at the start of the pod, but because we didn't want to end on such a bad, terrible, awful movie named Dark Phoenix, thought we'd save some good shit for the last. So, Dark Phoenix, 2019, not directed by Bryan Singer or Brett Ratner, but directed by long-term X-Men writer for these films. And I think he was a producer on a couple of them. And first-time director, Simon Kinberg. So, pre-release of this film, all I remember is that by this point, 2019, every day I'm looking at new movie news, what's going on, what the hell's, listening to plenty of podcasts about movies, as probably as you are, you know. So like,
I just started making a podcast too.
Ah, really? Is that when Big Dumb Movie arrived in 2019?
I think so.
Ah, cool, man. Cool, man. Was the first pod on that one 2019?
Yeah, Spider-Man 3 was our test episode, if you want to count it. It was episode 0, right. 2019, I think.
Cool, man. But yeah, well dialed into the movie news sphere at this point. There was just a lot of buzz about this film, but in a negative way because of how many reshoots it had. Obviously, you get a lot of reshoots with films and that these days, but like this one had extensive reshoots, and I'm not sure what they've took out or what they've put back in. But this film is a bit of a shit show and an awful way, I think, to end this run of the Fox produced X-Men films. There's a couple of aspects to the movie that I do enjoy. I think it's got a pretty sick third act on the train, which is yet again X-Men acting like a team for the most part. But yeah, because the focus is on Jean Grey and Sophie Turner, who I don't think's really that exceptional in the role. Like, it's fine.
No.
But yeah.
Boring as shit, just like Cyclops. Yeah. Don't give a fuck about her dilemma really at all. The whole movie hinges on her, and that's why the movie fails. Everything except the action scenes in this movie sucks.
Yeah.
The action scenes are good. Everything else is bad. Which to me, I said earlier, all I ever wanted was a good X-Men action scene. We get some here. That's cool. But I'm sorry, it's too little too late. The story just is not good. They go into space. She absorbs the Phoenix Force, goes crazy. Team tries to stop her. All right, so we have the X-Men trying to stop her, and we got Magneto trying to kill her. Mystique dies. I think Jennifer Lawrence is like, I had enough of these movies. Get rid of me.
And literally in the cinema, I was so pleased at that point. Because we all sort of knew that that's what it was. Like, if you look at her makeup in the first X-Men film that she appears in is way different to the blue makeup in this film, because she just didn't want to sit in the chair and get it done. So there's like, there's sort of these like scales on Mystique's face. Like, they get less and less and less throughout the films. Whereas this one, yeah, she's
very noticeably different in this one. Yeah.
100%, mate. 100%. And all that.
And at this point in the movies, her character is supposed to be like accepting of who she is as her natural blue form.
Yeah.
And too often she just looks like Jennifer Lawrence anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's just a makeup thing, right? Like, why does she have to be like regular Jennifer Lawrence with blonde hair while she's in the mansion? There's no reason for it other than she doesn't want to do the makeup, probably. I mean, she was a big star at this time.
Well, mate, she was the first female action star that had ever been.
I heard about that. I'm sorry I'm coughing so much. Again, recovering from sickness.
No, it's fine, mate. No need to apologize. But like, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring that one up. First leading, there'd never been a female-led action movie before the first Hunger Games film. It just didn't happen.
Aliens? I've never heard of one.
Aliens? What is that a made-up film? What is that? T2?
I don't know what that is.
Sarah who?
T2?
Connor?
What's that?
But yeah, Jennifer Lawrence makes a quick backdoor exit in this film, thank God, but we're not really left with anything to chew on in this movie. I will give it props that I think the first 15 minutes are heading in a good direction. I like the fact that, Professor X is now like on bloody speed dial for the president if anything major kicks off, and he can actually ring the X-Men team to go and solve the problem. Love all that beginning bit of them entering into space, but after that space sequence, the movie just skyrockets downhill, like into oblivion. Like who were the villains in this film, Corey?
Aliens.
That's it.
Alien meme.
Yeah.
So the villains in this movie are aliens with basically no personality, and they have the most generic motivation of they want power so they can take over the world and probably other worlds. They're very just stoic and bland. They lack any emotion. And the only benefit to them, as far as I'm concerned, is that they're good fodder for the heroes to fight at the end of the movie. Because having the heroes just fight regular people isn't really good enough. They need someone that's formidable. So these aliens kind of have special abilities. Bullets don't hurt them. They're super strong. They're super fast. So at least it's a good opportunity for us to have genuine, solid action scenes. There's 2 really great action scenes in this movie. To me, that's the only thing that matters in this movie in terms of like its quality is the action scene. So the first one is on the way to get Jean in the streets of New York. It's Magneto's crew against Professor X's crew. And there's some good fight scenes there. There's like great use of the environment with like the cars and like jumping around them, and Magneto like flinging them around, and he brings up a train out of the ground. Great use of the environment, great use of people's powers. Nightcrawler, teleporting people around, but then getting stopped by another psychic. So there's kind of 2 psychics. So Professor X can't just control the situation single-handedly. That's really great. And then when they get captured and they're on the train, and the actual villains of the movie, these aliens that are in human form, are attacking Professor X's group and Magneto's group, now united. There's just amazing action there. Like, that's, again, kind of like Days of Future Past. That's what I need. I need this group of people fighting together as a team against a common foe and utilizing their powers in a comic booky yet cinematic fashion. I'm not talking about 2 beams going together. That's not good enough. I need Nightcrawler to be fucking teleporting around knifing motherfuckers. Nightcrawler finally gets another good scene after all these years.
Yeah, man. I wonder if that was like the point of like, guys, remember X2? Remember that intro scene? That was pretty sick, man. Yeah, so what can we do in this one? Have a full-on Nightcrawler rage out at the end of this film. And you know what? I didn't know this actor had it in him. Like, he goes full craziness at the end of this film. Really appreciate it. But yeah, you're dead on. Like, sort of from that scene you're mentioning in New York, which it is a really good scene. It like sort of like this fight scene that takes place outside of this building. You're right. The cars falling everywhere and stuff like that. Then we move on to the train sequence. It's pretty good. But yeah, all in all, this movie's pretty terrible, and it was just a pretty sad note to end the franchise on. If I'm being honest, I just can't believe we done another round of this Dark Phoenix saga. It's just incredibly lazy, I find. They never retreaded any stories from the first three films, really, apart from this one. And if you're going to do it again, do it better. But as we mentioned earlier on, like me personally, I had more of an emotional connection with the prior Jean Grey than I do this one.
Every X-Men movie has something great. This one is definitely the train action scene. Yeah. It's great. Truly great. Where it ends is not on the train, though. It's Jean against the other alien lady, Jessica Chastain. Yeah, that is not it. That's not good. Just like beams and like intense stares. Just more CGI effects are fighting each other.
Yeah, more muddy apocalypse like CGI at the end, where everything's just, it's all blue screen. But
I think I hate Apocalypse more than this movie because Apocalypse doesn't even have solid action, in my opinion.
Yeah,
so
good point.
If I'm going to go back to my point of every X-Men movie has something great, this is a small thing, but this is what I'm going to give Apocalypse. Psylocke's costume is amazingly comic book accurate in X-Men Apocalypse. It looks exactly like her.
Yeah, I'll give you that 100%. And Olivia Munn, she's okay, man. She does well for the character. But yeah, great costume. Right, so we aren't going to end on Dark Phoenix because that would be really depressing. But we are going to talk about a slightly depressing film. It's a good movie. It's bona fide excellent movie, but also,
bona fide,
also quite depressing, if I might add. We are, of course, talking about Logan, that came out in 2017, directed by James Mangold, again, who directed the Wolverine. This film is amazing. I thought it was amazing when I first viewed it. I thought it was amazing second time I watched it with my partner. This was one of them ones that was accessible. It was like one of them ones when I came home after watching it and I said to my partner, you need to watch this one. Well, I think you should watch this one, definitely.
Is it better than Iron Man 3?
Yes, 100%.
I imagine that's what she asked.
Yeah, 100%. That is the first thing she asked. It's not Iron Man 3, is it? I went, no, God, it's not. God. But yeah, this movie's great, man. Great. I just think the tone it takes is like such a drastic, different tone to any of the other X-Men movies that we've had so far. I like it. It takes elements from Old Man Logan, the comic book, but it doesn't adapt everything from that book. There's the point of call in Old Man Logan is like the clinch of that story is that it's actually Logan that's killed the entire X-Men team and stuff.
Yeah,
that's the point of that book. However,
I like this take on it though.
Oh, I was going to say, I think this is a better take. I think this is. I don't say this that often, but I think in this rare case that it does better than what the comic book does with this particular aspect. I think it's much more poetic. The fact that it's Xavier that's been the downfall of the X-Men and not Logan, and it's like this. I love the sort of father and son aspect to this film where it breaks me in the first shots of this film where you first get reintroduced to Professor X, and he's obviously in the bed and he's gone senile. He's got like dementia, basically, like a man that you've respected for this entire franchise, played by such a great actor. But when this particular moment happens and you can see how like disheveled he is and how broken he is, as well as Logan, like Logan's barely keeping it together in this film, but their relationship is heartbreaking, poetic, and sweet. And ultimately, the best thing about this film is their relationship for me.
Oh yeah, Logan. This movie has a lot of heart.
Yeah, man.
And a lot of it stems from that. It's a different kind of movie. This is not your superhero. We're going to be the X-Men next movie kind of movie.
No.
It's kind of a tragic story about a man well past his glory days of being a superhero. And it's kind of the one last job story, you know, got to do one last job. And I don't want to, but there's still kind of that part of me that is willing to help people in need. You know, maybe it's not on the surface, but eventually you can tell it's buried in underneath Logan, a man who has had to endure more trauma than any human should ever have to. And here he goes again.
He does it amazingly well. I think this is one of Hugh Jackman's like best performances just in general. And like that's saying something because he's been in some amazing films. Um but yeah, man, like this was just like a bit of an emotional roller coaster. Um Mostly to do with all the stuff when it pertains to Professor X. What did you think of? I think is she called Daphne? Daphne King, who plays X-23. Um, what did you think about that? Because that was something I was looking forward to. I've got an X-23 figure upstairs where little blades come out of the feet. Awesome.
Amazing.
Yeah, man.
Her presence in this movie, she is like so ferocious as a character.
Yeah.
And you know, Wolverine is way past his prime. He is dying. Adamantium is killing him. He is slow. He doesn't heal like he used to. Things are not good for him in a combat situation. But we got this little vicious kid, like a little crazy fucking evil spider monkey
Yeah.
that just destroys mercenaries. And it's beautiful. She's a great actress too. She does a lot with her face. She doesn't speak in a lot of the movie. So she's a great up and comer. I look forward to the day in 10 years when we get her own movie and they bring her back and we get to see kind of what becomes of her and maybe the post events of this movie. But that aside, I think she's wonderful. It's interesting that we've had so many movies with Logan, with Wolverine, Hugh Jackman. He was in every movie except for Dark Phoenix. And that he got this great send off on the character of like this different type of X-Men movie. It's almost like just barely X-Men adjacent. They give the idea in this movie that a lot of the stories that were told about the X-Men and him were bullshit. Like maybe the movies we saw weren't true.
I love
right?
that.
Maybe those were just the comic book stories. And it's just such a great touch, you know, like the realism of this movie is so much more grounded. It's so much more emotional. It's more cinematic. It feels like it would be nominated for fucking best picture or something, you know, this one compared to like any other X-Men movie. It's just a great drama.
Yeah, I think as far as like actual filmmaking goes, this is like one of the best made films in the franchise. It's like not heavy on it's like CGI or anything. It very much goes for that quote unquote.
Oh, and when it's there, it looks good.
Oh
Those
yeah,
robot limbs look good.
awesome. They look awesome, and I actually quite like. I've forgotten the actor's name, but I don't mind the villain in this one. I can't remember what the character's called in this one.
Yeah, I don't remember his character name either because they don't say it too often.
No, but I didn't mind it. I think overall the villain isn't the strongest part of this film. I think it's really great up until like the introduction of, and don't get me wrong, I enjoy the whole film, but it's just like as far as villain goes, and I get it being sort of poetic from like a story point of view of like, you know, Logan's the villain in this film is like a younger, more ferocious Logan. Like it's his clone, isn't it, basically? Like it's not that it's I don't love that aspect of the movie. Like I like you know like it's sort of poetic that at the end he gets killed by himself basically but but yeah, just jumping off what you were saying earlier on. Sorry, I'm darting all over the place here, but like I like how haggard Logan looks in this one. So like his healing factor and the fact that that isn't like up to its full potential. And you see like just like the makeup of like where his claws have been and like the ooze that's coming out of it, just like little details like that I think are really really good. But yeah, also like that blew my mind, like that scene in the casino where she's got all them comics and like he's looking at them and he's like, and they're like proper X-Men comics as well.
Yeah.
And it's
They
just
got
like,
the X-Men font that's kind of like this font.
yeah, yeah, totally. And it sort of makes sense that, you know, like that if they've done all these missions that they would sort of get exaggerated by the public and stuff like that and made into these mythic stories. I like how like he says like, you know, maybe some of this stuff did happen, but certainly not like this. Do you know what I mean? I love that shit.
The one thing that I thought about on the most recent rewatch is that Apocalypse ends with a post-credit scene where they're taking mutant DNA, and I think Wolverine's is one of them, and they're putting it in a case that says Essex Corp, who's Nathaniel Essex, who's Mr. Sinister. So they're going to do something with the DNA, which for a long time I was like, they never did anything with that. There was no Mr. Sinister in any of these movies. They just put that in there and never did anything with it. But then I realized that might tie into this movie because they used Wolverine's genetic code for a number of beings. Clearly, X-23 and X-24, I think, is the other version of him. But maybe they should have just made that corporation Essex Corp.
Yeah.
Or Essex Corps.
100%. Just for a little bit of fan service, if nothing else. Like,
yeah, they don't even need to have Sinister in it necessarily. I mean, they could have Mr. Sinister be the scientist, but then it's not really needed. It could just be his corporation.
Yeah, I think it was a missed opportunity there, to be honest. But I forgot all about that end credits scene. Now you bring it.
Yeah, it is very forgettable.
Yeah.
As where this movie itself is very memorable. You know, you think of this movie and you just think of like this beat up, disheveled old version of Logan that is barely walking, let alone completing this mission. And then he's just getting more and more fucked up as the movie goes on, and he's not quite healing. Like when he walks out of that doctor's office and he has the gashes on his side rib, and they're just not healing.
Yeah,
like
he's limping the entirety of this film pretty much. Like even at the start, he's not in like the best shape.
Yeah.
Like, I love how like the thing of like when is it Caladan where he's at the base with Professor X and Logan comes home from picking up the medication. He's like looks at it and he's like, it's not even the right medication. Like what's wrong with you? Like you're losing it. Do you know what I mean? It's like
I'm glad Caliban is done with speaking in the third person, by the way, from Apocalypse. Like I'm glad he got over that little thing.
Yeah, it's so funny that like that was like the next film. Well, actually, no. When did Logan 2017? Oh, yeah. So literally the next film that came out after Apocalypse, they used that same character, but just continuity, schmontinuity. Don't think about it. It's fine. But yeah, Logan's a great film. I remember when it came out, people were like, "Oh my God, this is like the Dark Knight of like these newer comic book films," and I can sort of see it to a certain extent.
It kind of is.
Sort of is, yeah. I don't think it could be any better of a send off for Hugh Jackman, which is why I think we'll get into it a little bit after this. But I don't know. It's sort of there's like this horrible part of me inside that I sort of wish he wasn't coming back for another film because I've thought of how like good they ended things off in this film.
Oh yeah, there's such finality. I mean, he fucking dies, right?
Yeah,
in a very tragic way with what is basically his daughter holding his hand. And he gets, oh, this is such a good moment. When he gets buried, he has the cross, you know, she has the wooden cross on his gravesite. She takes it out and she turns it into an X. And it's just like, yes, this is beautiful.
I don't cry much in films, but that was like, I was getting emotional at that point. That just like that change of the cross to the X was just like,
thing of beauty, man.
Yeah, we've been watching this character for 17 years and now he's gone. Do you know what I mean? It's like, whoa. And that, sorry, go ahead.
Even though he's old, they find a way to give him a proper action scene because they have that like adrenaline stand-in, whatever it is, stuff that like he says makes you crazy. It's from the lab. Yeah. He injects himself with that and he's like back to his old self again. And he is fucking destroying the goons that the main villain sends off. That is sick.
Yeah. I think it's really impressive that 17 years into the character and this many films that he's been in, like you said, he's been in every one apart from Dark Phoenix, that they've managed to bring something new to the character, which
Amazing.
I think is a feat to be, really impressed by. Like, it just makes me think, well, what else can you actually do with this character apart from have a big chunky bit of fan service with this next movie that we're about to get? But yeah, any more final thoughts on Logan?
Logan is just a great movie. It's a great drama. It doesn't even have to be a comic book movie. It is just, it's one of the few in this list that is just by itself a great movie, like full stop.
Yeah.
And I love that.
I'll give a little shout out to the sequence where they rock up at the family's house, and that is a really traumatic scene where they all literally get blown away
That is rough.
sequence. Yeah, it is. Gets sort of not unnecessarily dark, necessarily dark for a pretty dark movie.
And this is our one and only rated R official X-Men movie. So it's they make good use and proper use of the gore in this movie. I don't think they overdo it. It's where it's needed.
Find the right balance with it, definitely. 100%. But Corey, that is the X-Men franchise. Obviously, we've missed a couple of movies out there. I think we came to a decision that we weren't going to do New Mutants because I've seen it once and it was okay. It was fine. There's a big bear in it.
A big cocaine bear. And we weren't going to do Deadpool either. Kind of its own thing, right? I think if you're going to X-Men movies, like this is the proper list of X-Men movies. This 10. Deadpool, X-Men adjacent, if anything. Same thing with New Mutants.
I will say that Deadpool 2 does feel like more of a X-Men film than it does a Deadpool film. I sort of like that. I'm a fan of Deadpool 2. Probably more than Deadpool 1, which I know I'll be in the minority with that. Worse are jokes, but I like Cable. I like Juggernaut in that film.
He's probably aged out of it by now, but I've always said that it's a crime against humanity that Stephen Lang did not play Cable in one of the X-Men movies.
That was just meant to be.
I know.
Like, especially when like you come away from like watching him in Avatar, like especially that film, like
first Avatar, prime time, perfect Cable right there.
Yeah, 100%. I think he wanted to do it as well. I think he was championing that role for himself a little bit.
Would have been awesome.
Too short, man. Too short. And Josh Brolin was already in the Avengers, so
right. Oh, that's fine, I guess.
But yeah, mate, I just after doing our analysis of all these films, I just wanted to know, what do you want to see in the future when it comes to the X-Men property? I know we're both aware that it is going to get put in the fold when it comes to MCU, but before that, we do have an upcoming Deadpool 3 coming out, which has a returning Hugh Jackman. What were your thoughts on that one when that one got announced? Did you know that eventually one day this was always going to happen, or did you think, oh, it's quite shocking that they're bringing Hugh Jackman?
I knew you'd come crawling back, you miserable sack of shit. No, that's from It's Always Sunny. I'm glad he's back. Obviously, the fact that Logan was the final one to me was kind of like, there could always be enough money to bring anyone back, you know. I think it'll be great to see him. I look very much forward to Deadpool 3 for that reason. If it wasn't including Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, I would be like, I'll see it. Maybe not opening night. But because Hugh Jackman is Wolverine in it, I'm seeing an opening night for sure. So it really amps up the expectations for me, and it amps up the hype. But about the X-Men, they got to have them in the MCU eventually. They're such a huge component of Marvel. All right. So like the reason that X-Men got made first of Marvel stuff, I mean, I don't want to say first because there was some stuff before it, but we got X-Men and we got Spider-Man around the same time. That's because those were like the two biggest properties in Marvel. Everyone knows who the X-Men are. Everyone knows who Spider-Man is. Not everyone knew who Iron Man was, though. That aside, I think we need a very solid live action X-Men series. That's what I want. I think we need a series for them because the movies I have found to be at times too limited in the stories they can tell. You can always tell broader stories and explore characters more in a series. There's a lot of characters in X-Men, so I think we need a series rather than jumping into a movie.
And I totally could see it working on something like Disney Plus because of like the school environment and stuff like that. You could make it just go further along with it, really build these stories up, really build the kids up, turning into teachers, turning into the X-Men team and stuff. Like you could, I think like MCU, Marvel, Disney, they know what they've got when it comes to the X-Men. Like you were saying there, the reason the X-Men films were made first was obviously like Marvel in the 90s were in a shit ton of debt and they sold off their Batman and their Superman, which
Yeah.
were obviously X-Men and Spider-Man. Sold one to Fox, sold the other to Sony. How they regretted that for the longest time. But it sort of like worked out well for Marvel MCU because they were able to put a load of C-list characters to the forefront because in my comic book days, I was not reading any Iron Man. I'll tell you that for nothing. And I'd read one Captain America story, which was the Winter Soldier story, which was the most famous Captain American story prior to the films coming out. So it obviously gave them the chance to bring these characters in and put them at the forefront. And now they're everyone knows who Iron Man is. Everyone knows who Captain America is. But to not have the X-Men in this fold for so long, which are like the X-Men are literally their Marvel Superman, like they're most known characters. Like apart from it's Spider-Man and X-Men, they're your two main
Top tier,
top
man.
tier, yeah, 100%. But I won't lie, I like the last couple of like MCU films the last couple of years haven't really done much for me. I'm starting to get a little bit desensitized by them. And I think it's just because of the particular formula that these films use now. Um, you could, I'd have someone say, oh, well, you don't feel like that about the Batman films or anything like that. Or, well, no, because they are doing genuinely like different things with them, different tones and different structures, like the Batman was like a 4-act movie. Like it wasn't a 3-act movie with a cloud in the sky at the end. Joker was like a total different like character study piece, like totally different vibe. And I just think Marvel have put themselves in this like weird corner that they're not going to be able to get out of. So like that's the only thing that sort of like panics me a little bit with like future X-Men installments. But I hadn't really thought of doing a series. That does make a lot of sense when it comes to the X-Men.
I think the X-Men will save the MCU, at least in the sense that people think the MCU needs saving, which I don't think they do. Because if they make a lot of money, then they are successful in their own eyes, at least in terms of what I assume upper management perceives with Marvel. That being said, I know there's been some misses, right? It goes without saying that there have been misses in the MCU as of recent. I think that's to be expected in any ongoing franchise that's been going this long. And I think they'll find what works and they'll bring it back. I have full confidence that they will, just because it's easy to be like, well, these 4 movies aren't good, therefore they're not good anymore. But like, what about the things that were good? They can just easily bring back some of those ideas that made those things work at the time and kind of revamp them into a way that works now. I'm not saying recycle. I'm saying like they can consider what made Iron Man work at this time. Okay, we need to take an idea that makes this character work at this time. Maybe a slight spin on things, maybe a direct adaptation of things. I think there's room to make things. We can make Marvel great again. It can be done.
Let's do it, man. I'm all for it. Don't get me wrong, like I've appreciated most of the films that have come out in the last couple of years. I just think what it is, the overall problem with Marvel currently in like that last phase, like that was all about trying the waters with some of these like left field characters. And while it was like left field character after left field character after left field character, while not having any of our wider appreciated superheroes within the film.
They went too woke for you.
No, not at all. Not no. I was not going to bring that up at all. That is not what I'm saying. What my point is that the wider audience to me attaches to characters like Daredevil that have had success in the past, like Spider-Man that it's had multiple success in the past. It's like they try to like build too many characters that people didn't know about in such a short period of time while having nothing going on that people can actually attach to. So I think by the time that Daredevil rocks in, Spider-Man and the likes of Fantastic Four, which are people like the audience and wider audience subconsciously knows who the Fantastic Four is because they've seen two shitty films from 10 years ago or three, sorry. Well, I really do try and forget about that Josh Trank one. Two story ones are really bad as well, but I don't mind Silver Surfer. That it's got elements that are okay, but they should have let Doug Jones just do the full thing. But yeah, man, I just think by the time we get a few more well-known, more objectively well-known characters, that things will start turning round. I think on the wider front, it's like Blade. Like apparently, there's been like a lot of problems with Blade and like that production.
Yeah,
but, like I think they are underestimating how much money that film can make because you've got multiple generations of people that are like, oh, I'm taking my son to see Blade. Like if I had a son, I'd be taking him to see Blade because I love that first movie in the Guillermo del Toro one, the second film. But it's just a character that people know. Or if they aren't a comic book fan, they subconsciously know who Blade is because of Wesley Snipes, that badass film in the 90s. So a film like that will make loads of money. Whether it gets them back on track on a story level, I don't know, but they've got enough story to tell with the X-Men, man.
There's a lot of room to make some great stuff, and I hope they do.
Yeah.
To me, a lot of it's going to hinge on some of like it's just going to be hard to adapt to a new Wolverine, for example.
Oh,
but
mate.
Maybe he won't be there in the beginning. You know, maybe we'll build to a Wolverine. Let's establish some of the other people first.
I don't envy anyone who's about to take that role or is auditioned for that role. They will have had like that prep. Like, look, Hugh Jackman has played this character for like 23 years now. People like him. Expect to get some hate, man. Do you know what I mean?
Beyond that, yeah, it's gonna be bad. It's gonna be Michael Keaton as Batman bad.
Yeah. Did you write in complaining about that one?
No, I was 3 years old. So I just sent a little piece of paper with like a star drawn, like a shittily drawn star.
Oh, well,
they had to hire an interpreter.
I think this brings us to the end of this super long podcast about the X-Men franchise.
Yeah, anyone that stuck around for this, you know, thank you. Again, I'm sorry about my sickness. It's been a struggle the last few days.
Don't apologize. We've finally made it. This has been a long time in the running, but I'm glad we've done it, and I'm hoping we have a couple of more to do in the future. Hopefully.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on this. You know, it's been a lot of fun. I'm glad I finally got to go this in depth into X-Men movies with someone who cares.
Yeah, man. No problem. I'm here to help. Right, guys, that'll be it for this episode. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Catch you later.